This is a real B&H customer story. Jack and Barbara, professional wildlife photographers and B&H customers for 30 years, live in remote Alaska. Hey, what's the population there?
About 50.
Welcome to the MPW Digital Preview Show presented by Walk-On's Sports Bistreaux. Ole Miss opens the 2021 season on Monday night in Atlanta against Louisville. On today's show, we'll look at the X's and O's of Monday's matchup with our resident football expert, Pete DeWeese. We'll go around the Southeastern Conference with Ryan Brown of Next Round Live. We'll look at the national scene with Jeffrey Wright of 92.9 ESPN in Memphis, and then talk some NFL and gambling with Barstool Sports Ben Mintz. Also, Visit Oxford Executive Director Kinney Ferris discusses what her and her staff's roles are with Oxford tourism and all the ways that visitors and locals can use Visit Oxford as a resource. She also discusses several of their big events upcoming the rest of the calendar year. We'll get to all that in a bit. First, I want to tell you about Walk-Ons. Walk-Ons Sports Bistreaux puts everything they've got into bringing you game day with a taste of Louisiana. Dig into their mouth-watering Louisiana cuisine like po' boys, gumbo, and voodoo shrimp, plus fan favorites like juicy burgers and fresh salads. Quality fresh ingredients you can't help but crave. Coming soon in November, Walk-On Sports Bistreaux, 1735B University Avenue in Oxford. Walk-On Sports Bistreaux creates an environment that fosters growth and belonging for all, where the team is bigger than the individual, where they exceed expectations and positively impact every community they serve. Think you have what it takes to bring people together and provide a memorable game day experience? Visit 720 Highland Colony Parkway in Ridgeland to join their team today. Walk-On's Sports Bistreaux, more than a restaurant. So we're going to go to Pete DeWeese here in just a second. First, this is a pretty long video. About 20 minutes in, Pete goes to some graphs, some film. So I'll have to take some graphics off. It might look funny for a few seconds, but it'll be all right. I think you will thoroughly enjoy this. So without further ado, here's Pete DeWeese with a preview of Ole Miss and Louisville. Pete DeWeese joins us here on the MPW Digital Pregame Show. Pete, as you remember from last season, is kind of our resident football expert. I told Pete the other day that I know a lot of people in football who can talk football and know football. Obviously, they're in football. They know football. But when you say, hey, explain that to me in a way that I can understand it, it immediately there's a language barrier that can be difficult to cross, which always makes me wonder how they then teach it to young people, but so be it. Pete does not have that problem. He's very fluent in football, and he's also fluent in football for idiots, which makes him fun to have on the show here. So he's been kind enough to agree to join us all season on the pregame show. Pete is now the offensive coordinator at Hillgrove High School in Georgia. So we'll be hearing from Pete throughout the football season. Pete, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, man. I appreciate the kind words. I raised by an English teacher, taught English for 12 years, and my degree is in English education from Ole Miss. So I better be able to explain some things.
Yeah, we both come from the same background, not the football part, but English part. Both of my parents have advanced degrees in English. I'm used to being corrected, so being corrected was not hard for me.
I am too, because my wife is one of the best English teachers I've ever met. So I'm accustomed to that.
Yeah. It bothers other people. I can't believe your mother corrected me. I'm like, man, I did that for every day of my life. What are you talking about? All right, let's talk some football, because I want to get your thoughts on this game Monday night, Ole Miss and Louisville. But I also want to get your thoughts on this team, this program. We talked to you. I think you did all 10 games last year with us. You would come on in the second quarter and you'd sort of guide us through what it was we were seeing in this weird COVID year with no fans in the stands and a first-year coach. And it sort of just felt like a whirling dervish sometimes. Like, I don't really know what we're looking at, but it's kind of fun. And they played all these incredibly fun games and won half of them and lost half of them. But I've kind of felt like I learned a lot. And now it feels like we're getting ready for more normalcy, because they had an off season, they had a spring, had an off season, they've had a full camp, a regular traditional 28 practices over 30-day camp, and they're getting ready to go play a game against a non-league team, Lane Kiffin's second game against a non-SEC team as the Ole Miss head coach. And yet there are some questions, like last year they really relied on Elijah Moore. He's not there. He's with the New York Jets. They really relied on Kenny Yeboah, especially the early portion of the season. He's not there. And I don't know that they have a tight end on the roster at this moment. I think Hudson Wolf might be that guy down the road. He might be that guy down in a few weeks. But I don't really know what to expect offensively from this team. And then defensively, there's a bunch of guys back, a bunch of new guys too. And DJ Durkin and his staff have had a full year to sort of figure out what the hell went wrong last year and how can you plug and play. So I know there's a lot to get to, but I'll start with just kind of an overview from you. What do you sort of expect as a guy who knows what it's like to build teams, what it's like to build a team on top of a team, that kind of thing? How different do you anticipate Ole Miss looking in year two than they did in year one?
I think the big thing, whether it's from a recruiting standpoint or just simply from a maturity standpoint, you're always going to deal with loss, right? Whether it's guys going to the draft, guys graduating out, or guys getting benched for COVID or for another injury, right? So you're always going to have to deal with loss. What great teams do, other than stack their rosters through the recruiting process, is great teams are able to constantly build depth, right? So when you hear right now about the Ole Miss defense, there's some elements off the field now that the guys that are gone for different reasons. Some transferred, some graduated, that played a lot of snaps and were productive despite what the numbers and the statistics maybe show Ole Miss accomplished or didn't. What you hope is that the growth and maturation from year one to year two in the system, taking a kid like Tyler Knight, who was flipping back and forth and working both sides of the ball, and giving him a full spring and a full summer maybe to operate in his home now, right? And taking guys that last year, like Otis Reese, who had a cloud over his head until suddenly the end of the season when, oh, by the way, he's hella productive, right? But you remove that cloud now. And not only is he in a position where you're expecting him to learn and you're expecting to practice, but you're expecting him to lead, right? So I think that this maybe as much as any, definitely more so than most in the past 15, 20 years, I think there's less that I know about what we're going to see, right? But I think that in a lot of ways in a good way. DJ Durkin is a good football coach. Partridge is a good football coach. Guys on that staff know what they're doing. I love some of the young recruiters that they've brought in that still have chops as coaches, right? So the question becomes, what does depth ultimately look like on the defensive side of the ball? And at some positions offensively, is have the JUCO D linemen and the transfer D linemen, like, are those kids really ready to be guys? And are they ready to be 15 play guys or 30 play guys? Because that matters, right? Over the course of a long season, as much tempo as you play now, all of that stuff, it matters so much. And so from a defensive perspective, I don't want to say they can only go up, because they weren't good last year. And at times they were really bad, but they also did some good things, particularly as the season got on and they started getting guys back and more comfortable. And you look at the bowl game against a good offense that was a little bit hamstrung because they didn't have their best quarterback, but the defense was still productive. So I think, and it's kind of, as I'm looking at Louisville and Brian Brown and what he's got going on, it's kind of the same thing from a defensive perspective. Both teams have pieces they really like. Both teams still have questions unanswered, right? So on the defensive side of the ball, it's just, to me, it's going to boil down to what can they really do at the line of scrimmage? Because, you can say what you want about football. It's always going to be won or lost at the line of scrimmage. And I do think there are some secondary players at Ole Miss that are good players. But if you can't win the line of scrimmage, and if you can't generate pass rush without having to be a heavy pressure team, those guys on the back end don't have a chance. You go back to when the years that Ole Miss was really good on defense. Cody Pruitt was one of my favorite players to watch. I love the way that kid played the game. He was not a cover guy. You could get him in cover 3 and let him see things, and he was going to be okay. You weren't going to match him up on a lot of people and have a ton of success. But look at what they had in the box. Look at the presence they had at the line of scrimmage and some of the things that they could do, with CJ Johnson and even guys like Tony Connor off the edge. So it wasn't a max pressure. You could still play some zone principles behind it and a lot of that stuff. That front made that secondary click, because it's not like we watched a lot of those guys turn around and go to the league.
Yeah.
So I think there is talent in the secondary, but for the great football teams, it's you. If you're going to be uber talented at one place, it has to be the line of scrimmage, because that's going to help make up for everything else, right? You can't be great in the secondary, not have the box to match it, and still be a great defense, because teams are still going to find ways to create problems. In the modern game of football, the way that offenses are working, that's more and more true. So to me, a lot of it is going to come back to what kind of growth have we really seen at the D-line position and at the linebacker level? Because if we get the growth there, I think the length and the athleticism that does exist in the secondary fans will feel better about it, right? If there hasn't been that improvement in the box, you're still putting kids on an island doing one of the toughest things to do in all of sports, and that's cover guys in open field.
And then it's still hard to get off the field at that point on third down. Third gets converted, and before you know it, it just feels like you're doing the same thing over and over.
We talked about it last year in some of the watch parties. You know, Durkin and Partridge, they both like to pressure. I mean, Partridge, when he was at Michigan, he's working for Don Brown. Don Brown's mantra in life is solve problems with aggression. You know, if Tupac had thug life across his chest, I'm sure Don Brown might have the same, you know, solve problems with aggression. Yeah. Partridge is from that tree. He has experience there. You know, Will Muschamp dials things up and get after you. Durkin, a lot of what he does comes from that Muschamp tree, which again, all rooted in guys that are going to pressure the football. You can only do that. You know, I think a lot of times as fans, we think, why don't we blitz more? When you commit numbers to the blitz, you take numbers out of coverage. So if you get home, it looks great. If you don't, you've really put your secondary in a bind. The less experienced, the less talented your secondary might be, the more at risk you put them. So there were games last year where Ole Miss would hold their own, something would happen, and they would get in a situation where they had to pressure, and all of a sudden it's the big play, right? I think their hope now is going to be we can pressure without risking so many big plays. And on the flip side of that, we can also not pressure because we can generate it with 4 or 5 and not have to add a 6 rusher. And that changes everything about the way you play defense.
Yeah, if you bring everybody and bring a lot of people and you don't get home, it's the equivalent in basketball of not playing transition defense. One versus 4 in transition, I don't care how good the one is, they're going to score.
That's exactly, I mean, you know, at the end of the day, if you really want to start talking about bringing 6 guys and doing things from a traditional defensive structure, it boils down to, do I play man-to-man, which is outside of hitting a 95-mile-per-hour fastball might be the most difficult thing in sports. I'm probably wrong, but I'll still stand and argue that. Or you play some type of a match cover 3. Well, cover 3 has holes. And the match part of that means that as routes declare, it essentially turns into a man-to-man. Well, now you're back to your original problem, right? If you play it like a true zone, there's holes. If an offense is good, they exploit the holes, right? If you play it as with match principles, the route declares. Now it's no different than had you been pressing at the line of scrimmage. The only difference is you tried to play with some depth and attack it late to try and make the quarterback hold the ball a little bit longer, right? So, you know, again, even when you're blitzing, you still have to have talent to get there, right? And there were times last year where when they would get desperate and they would dial it up and they would do some things, they still didn't quite have the guys to get there. So I think being year 2 in the system and hopefully some of that growth is going to make a difference on that side of the ball.
I want to get into Louisville in just a second. I do want to get your thoughts about how you anticipate the offense. You're an offensive guy. When you lose a weapon like Elijah Moore, when you lose and Lane Kiffin likes to use the tight end, Jeff Lebby likes to use the tight end. And again, I think Hudson Wolf is going to be a guy there pretty quickly. I don't know that he's ready in week 1, week 2, week 3, and he is a true freshman. When you are trying to adjust to, hey, I don't have that weapon in place. I've got Chase Rogers, who's a good blocker and is an adequate route runner, and I've got DeMarcus Thomas, who's an adequate player, but there's no superstar there. How do you anticipate them kind of making up for those differences? There's a lot of talk about Henry Parrish and Jerry Neely in the slot, out wide, that kind of thing.
So there's a couple of approaches. You know, I will say this. As effective as Yeboah was last year, he was never dominant in the run game. What he was willing, right? He was willing to throw his hat in there. He was to try and make the block, but he never was devastating. He really wasn't great at it, but because he was willing, he was serviceable, right? And through play design and through scheme, they were able to protect him. If you go back and watch, I don't know how many clips you can really find where Yeboah is at the point of attack. A lot of times, whether he was inserting on a backer, which is probably when he was point of attack more so than any other, or he was backside, right? Building a wall not necessarily being the hammer trying to bust the wall down on the front side. And so they were able to protect him with scheme, but also adapt to, because he was athletic, the way they were using him in the run game opened some things up. We saw against Kentucky and some of the other games where, they insert him on these linebackers, and then all of a sudden they slip him past in the red zone and they get right. So because he was a willing blocker and so athletic, they were able to take advantage of certain things. So to me, their approach might be personnel based, right? You got your thumper on the field, you thump. You have the tweener on the field, you use him a lot like they did Yeboah last year. And if you don't feel like you have the matchup you need in the run or pass game with one of those guys, now that is where you take those tailbacks, you take those other slot receivers, you get a tight end out of the game, you get into a true four-wide personnel, and you use their ability to now create a different structure for the defense to open up the run game. So I don't – losing his production is certainly something you have to be concerned about, just like with Elijah Moore. I mean, what that kid did last year, it's unbelievable. What he's probably going to do this year is unbelievable. So, but they have guys they're high on, and you're a little less concerned because so much of what he did was playing in space, right? You worry about the tight end because you think of him as being in the box and so involved in the run game, and he was, but he was also protected in the run game a lot. So I think they're going to be able to, look at the bowl game, right? You're out there not with your guy, and you're still productive doing things with one and two tight ends on the field at the same time, because Kiffin and Lebby both understand what formation structure and motion can do to a defense, and they can protect a guy that is not a great blocker as long as the pieces around him are dynamic. So when you take a Jerry and Ely and suddenly he's in motion, jet sweep type motion, you've just protected Yeboah, because now that edge is softer, right? They can't be quite as aggressive because you have to respect the speed that's attacking you on the edge. So I think that you'll see a lot of different ways, but I honestly don't know, and I could be completely wrong, but I don't know how much it changes, except for maybe the passing game piece of it, because he was so reliable as a pass catcher. If they are not as comfortable, then it may be a situation where the passing game is more 4-wide, 5-wide, and the run game, you get into 11P and you put one tight end on the field and you protect him, but still use him to help control the box.
All right, we talked about Ole Miss. I want to talk about what Louisville does, because they have a coaching staff too, and they've spent an off season and a camp and a game plan and all that stuff, and they've looked at Ole Miss and they're going to try to exploit weaknesses, and they have their own identity that they're going to try to establish. You watch a lot more of this stuff than I do. You know a lot of these college coaches. What is Louisville, in your opinion, going to try to do on Monday night?
So I don't know if I've got the ability to. Yeah, I think I can share screen. So I'm going to share something. I kind of put something together. I went out and I looked for some good film on Louisville. And all of my normal sources, nobody had anything from last year. I was able to find stuff from the year before. Wasn't as interested in that because, again, they're more along the progression now in their schemes, right? They've been on campus a little bit longer. New kids are in. Found plenty of film on YouTube. Didn't want to break any copyright laws. So I watched that. So you're welcome. So I watched that, but I didn't want to necessarily bring it here. So what I kind of decided to do was put together just kind of some basic information. And it for a football junkie and a nerd, you might love it. And for some of you, I hope you don't tune me out, but I just kind of want to give you some ideas of what I think the roots of their offensive and defensive side and how I see it potentially playing out against Ole Miss. So if you can enable screen sharing for me, I think I can kind of switch over to that. But, I'll tell you that when you look at them, there's a lot of continuity on that coaching staff. Guys that were together at App State came to Louisville together, added some new blood to the program. And a lot of what they did at App State and had success with has come with them, right? But they had to rebuild the roster a little bit on both sides of the ball. They are closer to doing that, than they were when they first got there. So things are starting to look to look just a little bit different. But ultimately, there are some similarities between who I think what Ole Miss wants to be and who Louisville wants to be.
How do I? Oh, wait, I see it.
Brian Brown. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So you want me to do where one participant can share at a time, which is just you, right? So I think so. You can do that right now, as far as I can tell.
Tells me it's disabled, but
okay. Let me go in and.
Okay.
Oh, here we go. See if that worked.
All right, we are rocking and rolling.
Okay.
So, Brian Brown, defense coordinator, obviously at Louisville, has done a good job there. I was at Ole Miss still when Brian got there, and wouldn't pretend to say that I knew him well, but we were in the at that time the Starn Center and then the IPF together. And when he came in, outside of being a really athletic guy, the buzz on him early was he was smart. He could pick things up. And so his rise as a coach is not surprising to people that have been around him in the game of football, because he's sharp and he does a good job. What you hear about Satterfield is kind of the same stuff, So I'm going to start kind of talking about their offense a little bit and show you a few things and then move into their defense. Offensively, they do a really good job of using formations and motions to control defensive structure and what I like to call distort box fits, right? Offenses that are very stationary, that line up in a formation and don't use motion, or maybe line up in limited formations. As a defense, you can set your anchor. You know who your force is going to be. You know who your cutback player is going to be. You know what responsibilities are. And as I'm seeing a typo on my screen, it's driving me nuts. But you know what those things look like, right? As teams motion and shift and use tempo on top of that, it distorts how you fit things and you force kids to think and react on the fly. There's a reason that when Gus first got to Auburn, you saw him have a lot of success, in particular in the run game, but also in his play action game, because he placed an emphasis not only on tempo and urgency, but his motion game. It would distort a lot of boxes. It would make teams suddenly that safety who's been told I'm the cutback player gets motion. Now all of a sudden he becomes the front side force player, and his role has changed and his alignment has to change, and it has to happen like that, right? So you get a lot of that from Louisville. Everything they do is based off of their wide zone run scheme. When I say wide zone, if you think about the Denver Broncos of the 90s, you think about the Tennessee Titans right now, that is wide zone. It is a stress the edge run play that's not really trying to get to the edge.
Wider splits to create
sometimes wider splits, sometimes, kind of the different, sometimes based on personnel, sometimes based on different fronts and different rules. Some teams will true combo things a little bit more than the way that they do it. But the big thing about wide zone is the name of it implies that you're trying to get the ball on the perimeter. When teams talk about running stretch, you are stretching the defense, and a lot of times you're trying to get on the perimeter. The wide zone that they run, in football, right, a lot of run schemes rely on vertical displacement. You're trying to get a double team and move a 300-pound defensive lineman that doesn't want to go backwards, right? Linebackers then run straight downhill, scrape barely over the top. It's played in a small booth. With wide zone, vertical displacement is good, but horizontal displacement will win. So what you're actually trying to do is you get bodies moving horizontally. You're asking both D linemen and linebackers now to essentially play in space more so than when you run straight at them. And while your aiming point may be to get to the edge, the reality of the scheme is it rarely does. You end up creating a vertical seam where the running back's going to stick his foot in the ground and go get vertical. And because of the horizontal displacement and not necessarily trying to get guys moving backwards, but side to side, you can create walls on the backside that give you that backdoor cut. So everything they do is based off that. That means bootlegs and play actions are based off of it. Their complementary run game is plays off of it. But it is without a doubt the driving force behind what they do. Okay. They do it with multiple personnel packages. You'll see them with one tight end on the field. You'll see them with two tight ends on the field. You'll see them with three tight ends on the field. One tight end means you've got three receivers out there, and a lot of times one of those receivers is in motion if the tight end himself is not in motion. The back is most often in the pistol because it helps the wide zone game. It helps your play action. It helps your bootleg, but they will offset him and put him next to the quarterback for certain runs, but especially in their third and long passing type stuff. They do a really nice job moving players around to distort the box. There is some carryover in elements of what Ole Miss does from a wide zone perspective and the way that they like to attack. Alabama is one of the best at doing it. Ohio State does a great job of it. When you watch the LA Rams or the Tennessee Titans now on television, if the LA Rams spent their entire offense in the shotgun and not under center, you would watch Louisville and see a ton of similarity. Okay. Because it's all about, let's use a little bit of eye candy, get guys to slow down on the backside. Now we've created numbers on the front side, and everything kind of systematically works off of other things, right? If I'm running wide zone and the backside defensive end or linebacker is making the play, then my answer is bootleg. Because now when I get the quarterback out, in theory, you don't have a player for him, and I'm able to get somebody in the flat that can potentially go for big yards.
That's where having a guy like Cunningham who has some athleticism and good feet it makes him an extra weapon, right?
The game I watched the most as I kind of prepped for this was I watched last year's Miami game. I knew they're high tempo, much like Ole Miss wants to be. I knew athletic quarterback that can throw the ball, much like Ole Miss has. I also, Rhett Lashley, that's calling plays down there at Miami, was with Gus at Auburn, and he is not Gus at Auburn anymore. His departure from Gus, the roots of it are there, but he has grown in who he is and the way he attacks teams. And there, again, all the elements are there, but he's adapted. He's kind of taken that next step. And so they were really fun to watch because I wanted to see how they, as an offense, attack Louisville's defense and with the tempo and the formations and the things that I know that they do at Miami. But I also wanted to see Miami, who plays an aggressive style of defense, how Louisville chose to attack them. Right. And so you really get a lot of things, but man, the quarterback made a couple of plays in that game getting out of the pocket, and it's a game that got out of hand for him. And that's the other thing about this team, that they are who they are. And when I say everything is based off a wide zone, that's where their home is. So in the fourth quarter against Miami, when they're down 17, they don't suddenly become an air raid offense. They are who they are, and that's what they're built to be. So if you get a lead on them, they're good enough to threaten it, but it can cause some problems in what they do. Just as an example, I drew up some play diagrams here, kind of a base look of what you might get out of Ole Miss against some of the kind of formations and motions. And I figured I would kind of use this as an opportunity to maybe show you the way that their motions and formations and some of the things they do can kind of cause problems. So like here you see they've got one of the receivers in like a jet sweep type motion. So as simple as that sounds, right, and as simple as it may seem, what it can do to a defense is cause issues. If that guy lines up there and never moves, then defensively you have to match over here with three defenders if you're going to play some type of zone, which a lot of times you'll see out of Ole Miss. Now Here, you have to fit your box to make sure that you have an edge, which probably means this safety is coming down to be your force player if he gets run action his way, right? You also probably have to kick the front so that you get a hard C-gap player with linebackers that have the ability to scrape if you get action that way. Well, as you get this motion, you almost force a rotation now that has changed your coverage. So you go on the left side of the screen where you originally had the two receivers, where you're playing cover 2, cover 4, maybe even a cover 1 principle. And as the rotation happens, you almost force into some type of a cover 3 type look, right? And in a lot of ways, cover 3 is probably where you want to be against them because it can square and balance up your defense. But with some of the things that they do in the play action game, if they get you in cover 3, they have ways to attack you in cover 3, right? They do a really nice job. So while Louisville may bring this guy in jet motion, they might give it to him, but it's also very likely that they're really going to do something that puts the ball back away from it. So now as you've rotated defenders away from that motion, they're going to now flood the concept back the other way in the run game or in the passing game to now try and clear some things up. So some of the ways that they'll do that, is like I said, they're a big wide zone team. So off of the motion, they may run wide zone back to the offense's left. So you're now trying to reach and run and work to the outside shoulder, and everybody's essentially working to gap over. And if the center can take over that end, he's going to. If this tackle can get to the nose, he will, but a lot of times he'll get to the backer. So now you'll take that tight end and you've got some options with him. With an athletic quarterback, you can arc him to take the force defender, and now you can read with the quarterback. What they like to do the most is take this guy and have him dig out this end and build the wall and put their tailback on their wide zone path away from the motion. Now you get all these guys flowing this way. And if you can't win at the line of scrimmage and control the horizontal displacement, the ball cuts back and gets vertical. And it's really hard defensively to match all of that, right? Some of the other things that I saw them do against Miami, same type set, but now they took that same motion guy and they motioned him in. Well,
motioning from almost a flanker position
from a wide, almost getting a number from the cheerleaders to now bringing him in and getting him in this position. Maybe he's almost behind the X. Right. Maybe he's splitting the difference, right?
Right.
What that does now is gives you, some ability to do some different things, right? One thing that they did early in the game against Miami was they used that short motion. They faked their mid zone or wide zone back this way, and they booted. And by using the motion, they're now able, instead of getting a tight end, get a fast player into the flat. And they use the tight end to now block down on this defensive end to help set the edge and help the quarterback. And then he leaks himself back out late. If you're a Saints fan, you're going to see Sean Payton run this type of concept 10 times a game. Okay. Then they're going to use the splits that are already reduced to now get these guys into some type of a layered concept that gives Cunningham the option of, here are two guys right underneath you in your face. You have a first down and a potential home run ball, right? And you also have your legs. So just using that little bit of eye candy to do different things, because that same motion doesn't just have to be used for that, even though it's effective. It can also be used to go crack and set a wall. It can be used to get back out into the flat now and get a nice little easy rub route for a first down. So there's a lot of simple creativity in the things that they do. They will get into some almost bunch type looks and they'll bring the guy back behind the quarterback. So when you get in something like this and you get back into your wide zone family, you can put him on the star. Now you're running your wide zone here and you have a couple of options. you can either bring him front side to account for numbers, but what they really like to do is they like to what's called slice him backside and let him be the guy that builds the wall. Well, between everybody getting this horizontal displacement in the run fit, the motion which forces you to now bring a force player to the box and potentially rotate coverage, right? This motion occupies him, potentially him. You build the wall with the Y. So if he can't get to the edge when he goes to cut now, there's that horizontal displacement we've talked about. There comes that kind of backdoor angle that becomes available for you.
Which gets right back to the very initial thing you said, which is you absolutely defensively against that offense, you have to win up front.
You have to win up front. And that's, there's a lot of different techniques. A lot of defensive linemen play what's called the lag technique on the backside of zone blocks now. That's kind of become the rage. But there's different techniques. There's different things you can do. There's different stunts you can do. At the end of the day, the game is two things. It's math, it's numbers.
Yeah.
And then it's bodies, right? If my bodies are better than your bodies, sometimes the numbers don't matter. If our bodies are equal, the numbers 100% matter. So a lot of what they do, and like I said, you watch the Rams play or the Titans play, and they know they're doing it with great bodies, but they're doing it against other great bodies, and there's still a reason to do it. When you're Satterfield and you're coming from App State, a team that plays in a good conference, but also steps up and plays big boys, you have to have something that can give you an edge and help you win numbers when the bodies aren't going to win for you. So now you bring that to Louisville, and it's just as good. It's just as dangerous. You still have all those same weapons. And if you can recruit yourself to the standard of having those better players, life gets very difficult now for defenses. This was kind of I wanted to make sure I showed this one because, when we talk about things that you might see when you watch the game, they will do some too tight stuff like we talked about, right? And they like to get in this little wing twins formation. So you've got, a tight end wing on one side and you've got twins on the other. Because again, it's tough on the box. You have to commit 8 defenders to the box. You also have to make sure you can defend 2 eligible receivers on this side of the ball with the potential of a third, while also having the same issue on the backside. So from a defensive perspective, it is a balanced formation that creates extra gaps in the run game. So they'll do a good bit out of this. One of the things that they did last year out of this that I thought was extremely interesting was they like to use it as a shift. And again, it goes back to the misdirection and the eye candy to gain numbers. So they actually, against Miami, they lined up like this. It was on like I think a 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3 type situation. They line up like this, and then they shift. And what they actually did was they took this tackle and they moved him, and he became the 3-man in the surface here. And they took the fullback that had been out here, and they moved him now into the backfield next to the quarterback. So as a defense now, you have to make a decision, right? Do I spend all my money over here where they just put all these extra hats and bank on that being where the ball's going? Because if you don't, that's where the ball is going to go. But if they find on film or throughout the course of the game that you're going to overplay that unbalanced, what they actually did against Miami was they came back and they went their wide zone back to the nub side. They got them to overshift. They got him out in front, and they now were winning the math battle, and they got an explosive run. So they're going to do some things like that, some things that are very creative to try and create numbers. So part of the challenge defensively, I think, for Ole Miss is going to be, and I know fans hate to hear it, but it's going to be playing with eyes. Because if you don't recognize the shifts and the motions and you don't communicate those things, you can get yourself in a lot of trouble.
So when you say that, and I generally know what you mean because I played defense eons ago, so I understand what you're talking about. But for the person that's just watching the game, when you say playing with eyes, can you walk them through that a little bit? Like who specifically is communicating and so who they're communicating to?
So let's go back a slide. Okay.
Okay.
So right now, the way I have this drawn up, I can't tell you this is how Durkin's going to align. It's a traditional underfront. You have a guy here, he's going to pierce that gap right there. He's got to win between those two guys, spill anything in the run game outside to either a corner or safety who's going to be your force player. Okay. You tilt the front, and so you have numbers there with your backside player still in position. So this free safety who is sitting here right here reading probably this tight end for a run read or a pass read and is ready to go play football, to get downhill, to be a part of coverage, he is operating in a completely separate world right now than this strong safety. As soon as they make the shift, you have to kick your front. If you had left the front where it was, this end would have been out here. This nose would have been over here. This end would have been there, and this jack would have been there, and you would have had nobody in this gap. Okay.
Now the quarterback's got an obvious read. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. And you just made things real simple in the run game, right? Well, so the linebackers have to see it. They have to kick the front. They have to communicate that. But that safety that was over here keying that tight end, now he probably is going to bring himself over here because he's going to have to become a part of the run fit. Well, now he and this strong safety that we're operating in different worlds, they have to be on the same page now. Because if he's trying to check into a zone coverage that allows him to go be a part of the run box, and that guy doesn't hear it, and he still thinks that he's in man-to-man coverage on this Z, all of a sudden you have a soft edge because the communication hasn't been there, because the strong safety doesn't realize that switch has been made, right? It's like, you made the basketball comment earlier. If you're playing basketball and you're playing defense and you don't get a switch call,
layup,
you don't switch off, the pick and roll just killed you.
Yeah.
Right. So it operates in a similar fashion, except now it's not two guys communicating switch. At times it's five. Right. And depending on what side of the ball a coach coaches on, may affect the argument you hear, but offensively, one guy can be wrong and it can still be a big play. Defensively, if one guy is wrong, you probably just gave up a big play.
And it comes full circle a little bit to one of the things you were talking about earlier on my really long-winded question at the beginning of this segment, where you talk about the young guys being physically ready to play, and a bunch of them are, man, they look the part. But it's the difference between the mental taxation of, hey, I can play 10, 15 plays without losing it, to 30 plays where you're getting taxed a little bit, you're getting tired a little bit, you're really having to think, you're having to do things that, nothing against the high school game, you didn't have to do these things at the high school game as fast as you did. And if you made a mistake at the high school level, a lot of times you didn't get caught, it didn't get capitalized. Now they catch it and boom, they light up a scoreboard.
None of those kids have played in an environment that will be anything like the environment they'll be in on Monday night, right? None of them have played at that same tempo against multiple players that are just as good or better than them.
Yeah.
All those variables. And then you put on top of it just natural nerves, right? And energy. And it's hard. It's real hard. And, for a long time, the state of Texas and the state of California were widely considered premier recruiting ground, not just because of the number of kids that come out of there, because their population is so massive. The size of those schools and the commitment to coaching in those schools was ahead of a lot of other states, right? In the 1990s, there were some good quarterbacks in the state of Mississippi. You didn't see many of those guys come out and have immediate success in the college level. That's because the high school game in Mississippi at that time, at most places, was not where it is today. There's great coaching going on right now in the state of Mississippi and throughout the landscape of high school football. And a lot of that is social media and the internet. There's so much more exposure now to quality instruction for coaches, right? But so you may get kids that played in schemes that asked not the same amount out of you, but close to it, right? Just depending on where they went to high school. But even those kids, there is still a learning curve. So for sure. But like I said, I think it'll be interesting to see how does Ole Miss handle the shifts and the motions. And at some point they're going to be out of position, right? It's, can you weather the storm, play the next play, and be good? So
great stuff.
On the other side of the ball, the Louisville defense, they're an odd front defense. There's tons of carryover from the App State. App State 3-4 was a system that was tweaked and run, but for the better part of over 15 years, the scheme remained very similar. And there's still a lot of it in what you see now. First and foremost, it is built to stop the run and keep things in front of them. They'll play some press, but they don't play a ton of press. It doesn't mean they're not playing man, but they're not going to get beat at the line of scrimmage on a fade or a slant and let a ball go 80. They're going to play with depth, be prepared to go drive routes, and try to keep things in front of them. But ultimately, they want to stop the run and then, be a little bit more aggressive when they can get you into passing situations. They play a mix of match quarters with multiple checks, including what's known as trap coverage. And I'll kind of walk you through what some of that looks like. They look like a team to me, particularly when I'm watching them in that Miami game, that they use a lot of instead of pre-snap calls. And tempo can do that to you as a defense, right? If Kiffin is going at breakneck speed, it is easier to get a kid to see a formation and communicate what he sees based on game plan than it is to look to the sidelines, get a call, process that call, communicate that call, execute that call. So the faster an offensive goes, the more likely it is you're going to see a check-based thing. Because one thing defenses know, there's a lot of time too, particularly whether for some teams it's first down, but for a lot of offenses it's second down. If you can get them through second down and they haven't had success and gotten you into a short yardage situation, they're going to slow down to make sure third down's right. Well, now as a defensive coordinator, that's when you can kind of get in your bag a little bit and be creative, and you can make a call, right? But as I'm watching the Miami game, I'm seeing a lot of redundancy in how they're choosing to play certain formations, right? Their third down package can be aggressive and exotic. One of the things I did find kind of a little write-up from earlier this year that talked about, a lot of their safeties, I believe, are not experienced kids that played a ton of ball for them last year.
Yeah,
but they're smart kids, and they think they're picking up on things. Well, that's easy to say. The question is, how much have they really picked up, and how much can they actually execute? Right. So that'll be one of the most interesting things for me, because we know, if nothing else, Lane Kiffin knows how to exploit a secondary. Right. So if Louisville decides that they want to be complicated and try to mix the picture a lot for Ole Miss, it could go bad. Right. Now, the quarterback's got to have good eyes, because he's going to see some things and get some things that they're going to try to shock him and surprise him and rotate guys and do some different stuff. But the flip side of that is that can put you at risk as a defense too. So I'm real curious to see just how much faith he has in that back end versus how much does he feel he really needs to be successful on the back end.
So there will be people that hear 3-man front, a lot of multiple people in coverage, that kind of thing. Hey, that's what Arkansas did. That's what Barry Odom did last season. Are there any similarities between what Brown does and what Odom tries to do?
Yes and no at the same time.
Sure.
I think you'll see some of that, right? Here's the difference. What you saw at Arkansas was you saw the 3-down linemen playing in typically what's called 4 eyes. They're inside shade of the tackle. You have the head up nose. So they're saying we have linebackers and a nose that are going to be responsible for A gap. B gap is excluded. We put big bodies there already. We're going to play off the ball on the edge a little bit, and we're going to funnel bodies. We're going to funnel the ball to that gap, and then we're going to have multiple players there to vice the ball and be waiting on it, right? And so I don't see Louisville playing off and using that strategy as much in the games that I watched last year. That doesn't mean it's not going to happen. From the standpoint of it's not heavy blitz and it's not always complicated coverage, it is simple, keep things in front of us, rally to it. They're going to do it. The difference is they typically get guys at the point of attack on the line of scrimmage now, as opposed to leaving them 5 yards off and funneling to it, because that 5 yards off creates some difficult lanes in the passing game. And when you can rally and control the run game from that defense, it gives you a lot of things. So we could see some of it, particularly in certain situations, but I don't expect to necessarily see the same structure. This is something that we saw Miami do quite a bit in the game, and it's a common formation from Ole Miss, right? It's a common formation for almost anybody in football now. Okay. So they're playing their 3-man front, but a lot of times it's going to play out like an old school 50 front.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So that Jack, he is a run first player, and they will take this strong side backer, nickel, whatever they want to call him, and they'll do different things. If he gets any type of a run read, he is a run player. If he were to get this tight end fast to the flat, he is going to take him to the flat and have him in coverage. The flip side of that, if he gets a vertical release, he is probably going to collision and zone back out into this window, right? So he's not necessarily going to be sitting off all the time, sitting waiting like you might have seen last year at Arkansas, but he's not necessarily blitzing even though he's close to the line of scrimmage. They're going to, like Arkansas, focus on plugging those B gaps to now leave these guys to scrape over the top of things and to try and fit gaps, right? And try to keep them clean as they can to let them run. On the back end, they're playing a lot of what looks to me like match quarters principle. So old school quarters would say that you divide the field into 4 sections, you get depth, you keep things in front of you, and if something crosses your quarter, you take it.
You're taking away the big play.
Yes. So what they're doing now is they're playing the same principles, but as routes start to shape up, they have the ability to pass routes off based on depth, based on stem, based on certain things. So both of these players,
you better have new players who can communicate, or else guys are slipping behind you and your clipboards are throwing up into the air.
And those are some of the things that Kiffin does best.
Yeah. Right.
They're playing that match quarters. There's a good chance a lot of times that if these guys have wide splits, if there's a lot of space between that Z and that H, his eyes are going to be here and his eyes are going to be here. If they do not have real wide splits, most likely both eyes are here. And the reason they're going to do that is if he gets some type of an out release right now, he will take it and he will work now to replace him on top.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. If you get an inside release here, the corner now knows he has all of one. Wherever he goes, he's mine. If I get a vertical, yes. Yeah. If I get a release, I am now all of one. Right. So based on the split of the receivers is going to affect what they choose to do. They also have things they'll call like, they may call Meg, man everywhere he goes. They'll mod, man on demand, man over depth. People communicate it in different ways. But what that is saying is this, right? If this corner looks at that safety and says, I'm mod, he's telling that safety that if he does anything under 5 yards, he's yours. If he does anything over 5 yards, he's mine.
Gotcha.
So what that allows that safety to now do is focus here. And if he gets an in call, he knows his eyes take him right to something that's going to be underneath. He doesn't have to be overly aggressive on it. So there's a lot of communication that goes on that back end. Same deal. That safety can look out at that corner and say, hey, lock. And now it's, you got him wherever he goes. Right.
Yeah.
This backside safety now, if the Y were over here, this safety would be over here, and he in this corner would be playing with the same rules. Because he is front side, he is here. He knows he has help on this from him or him, depending on what check they're playing. But if he gets anything vertical, he's here.
It's his.
Yep. He's not typically going to come all the way over here and align head up and tight. If he does, it's almost a guarantee this guy or both are blitzing, because now he's been told I got to react faster. Right.
If it was too far over, to the in this case the far side of the field. If he moves too far over there, it creates a situation where the X receiver, all he's got to do is beat one man.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you've already isolated this guy to some degree. But if I can hang out over the ball or over the guard, one, it helps me get a run pass read. Okay. But the other thing that happens is if they come back and run some type of a counter or something this way, I can be late to the party. That's hard for me to, if I'm here, I can only be the cutback player. But if I'm here, I can funnel things, right, and help prevent some more big plays. So that's kind of a common thing that you'll see. Again, it's about stopping the run first, keep things in front of me in the passing game. This is another way they attack the same formation. You see now what they've done is they've backed this star off the ball, and now they're playing a true zone over here. They're playing a trap too. So now if you try to throw a speed out or a bubble, he's gained inside leverage and probably starts deeper and squirrels his way down a little bit, but he's now in position to cut that route, to take it away, to jump the bubble, whatever the case may be. And because he's inside leverage, if it's a bubble, it's a very hard position for him to now legally block the defender, right? What you're also doing there, though, is you are putting yourself in a little bit of a bind, because if he releases vertical, this guy, instead of attacking now, is going to try to sink, but his leverage has changed. Yeah. So now this safety has to be in position to break on both, and he has to be in position to wall this and not let it bend inside, because if it bends inside, this guy is in a world of trouble, right? From a coverage standpoint, one of the things that they've had to do now is put the free safety on the backside, because if they block down, and run counter back this way, you need that safety to now fit the run game. You're outnumbered. Your jack here has to force it back inside, and now you hope that between this scrape and this fit, you're safe against the run. If that jack messes up and the ball spills to the outside because he's in man-to-man coverage, you put a lot of pressure on this guy to now make an open field tackle with no chance of getting help from this other linebacker.
Yeah, it's make or break at that point.
100%, right? And they've had to distort the backers a little bit, because now that you've backed him off, you have to have a force player right here in C-gap, right? So all of it plays, it's all a chain, right? Everything kind of has to be in unison. So this allows him to be aggressive against the run, but it keeps him safe against all the RPO stuff that so many teams will do. It's probably not something he loves in a true drop back situation. But on a rundown, it is safe, especially against a team that's not going to run a ton of power, where they're going to try to shove it right down your throat right there, which is not something we saw a lot of last year, in part, I think, because of Yeboah and what his skills were and were not. And if that's still the case on the Ole Miss's roster, that same threat's not there. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So what you see a lot of times for Ole Miss, very similar to the principle that we see from Louisville, where Louisville's trying to get horizontal displacement, Ole Miss will often work vertical displacement off of a true inside zone track, and now ask him to dig out, possibly end up on the mic. And what happens is you'll see the running back will press it here and then end up cutting back, hopefully off of a good down block by this tackle. So you're just getting to the same thing different ways. Your Ole Miss, you're trying to rely a little bit more on vertical displacement. Your Louisville, it's all about horizontal displacement. If they get you into third down, they will get a little bit more exotic. This was one of the big third down blitzes that they used in the Miami game. It's a trips open formation, very similar to something we see Ole Miss do a lot. And what they did was they took this backside, they personneled it, I'm pretty sure, where this was not the guy that's been standing at the line of scrimmage as a run player, but an extra safety. And they make him look like a linebacker. And against these 3-by-1 formations, you're getting him to the middle of the field. So what they're doing is they're playing cover 2 to the single receiver. It allows you to put 2 guys over a dominant receiver. And now they're committing to playing cover 4 over here So it's a hybrid coverage now where you're saying deep quarter, and you're adding this middle of the field Tampa 2 type player, similar to what you saw out of the old Tony Dungy teams, where they would run their Mike linebacker deep to the middle to protect everything. So here you're instead getting him ratting to that position, because if you're trying to work a vertical concept and a 4 vertical, which is something everybody on offense runs, you can get over the top of this guy while pressuring him underneath. If the quarterback sees this safety get vertical and not run with the Y, and this Mike does not do a good job collisioning that Y, he thinks he's got a wide open hole shot. Well, by bringing this guy from the backside, he's coming
that window
out of the vision to potentially undercut the route. Now, if he doesn't get there, it's a home run.
Yeah.
But if he gets there, things could be real bad for the offense. So they'll do some things like that. There were some reps where if you take this Y and you move him over here, they play the same thing, but what they did instead with this guy was they put him in the middle of the field. So now it's a 3 high safety look, and he's essentially doing the same thing, but what it allows you to do now is be more aggressive here with the blitz, because now he can rotate down if he gets action in front of him, right? Yeah. So it changes the picture for the quarterback, and it allows them to be a little bit aggressive with what they want to do in the box. There's going to be a lot of 3rd and longs where you don't get any pressure. It's these 3 guys trying to get at the quarterback, and it's this type of look with him maybe spying the running back for a screen, bracketing the single receiver if they think he's a threat, and maxing out their zone elsewhere and trying to force him to fit the ball into tight windows.
Puts a lot of pressure on the quarterback to make good decisions at that point, because
100% it can. And so, those 3rd and longs at times are really the only time that I would tell you comfortably that that's where it's going to look similar to those Arkansas games last year.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to show you this real quick. This was some film that I do have, and these all actually come from the Alabama game. But again, talking about just some of the similarities of things that you might see between Louisville and Ole Miss. This is the Ole Miss offense right here, and this is Yeboah, and I'm pretty sure that is Elijah, and I may be wrong. You see, they've got the tailback and the pistol. So this is the same wide zone scheme. You're going to see all these guys here tracking wide zone. They're going to release Yeboah on some type of a route to distort the fit, and they're going to bring him across. And all they're asking him to do is, if somebody's there, set a pick, be in the way, don't be a killer. And it's all about get bodies moving. And if I don't get to the perimeter, take my cut right now. So this is a 3rd and something, not long, probably. I can't actually see the sticks and where it is. It may, I take that back. It's third and forever.
3rd about 15.
Third and forever. So
yeah.
maybe they're trying to just be safe here. But so you see everybody's working that wide zone angle to the right. Here comes, more back across. Yeboah is holding safeties. All he's trying to do when he releases right here, he's not getting this ball unless Corral looks up and he's just uncovered and he's going to pull up and throw it to him, right? Well, there's a safety there. So all he's doing now is he is occupying 2 defenders that now make a potential cutback for 5 yards, a cutback for 15.
Okay.
Right. Because again, you've distorted the box, because we think about so often, you think these guys are responsible for stopping the run. If you don't involve these guys in stopping the run, you're either really bad or really freaking good.
Okay.
And there's no in between. Right. So you can see here again, same type of stuff you might see out of Louisville's offense. And there it is right there. And if you go back and watch it from the top and just watch this safety, they need one of these 2 guys to make this tackle. But not because of motion, but because of the formation structure and what they do with Yeboah. Both of those guys are now out of the run fit. And if you make this guy miss, it is a truly explosive run. And there it is.
Yeah, he misses, and there it goes.
Yep. And if you watch it, we can see the end zone copy here. Okay. Again, you can see them communicating everything that's going on, and them seeing number 8 right here has to have every one of these dudes thinking what the heck's about to happen. Right. So it's a way that just knowing personnel does the same thing. But you can see wide angle of departure, right? He's thinking, I'm here if I can get there. As he feels all these guys coming, here's his wall being built, and that cut that looks backside really probably happens about right there. Yep. Boom.
Yeah. Oh,
Take
look
your foot in the ground, accelerate.
Yeah.
You're going to see Louisville hit some similar runs like that against the Ole Miss defense. It's highly likely. Again, something else from the Ole Miss offense, very similar to what you'll see out of Louisville. Bunch type formation. They're going to move Elijah across. This is almost the same play, but now instead of slipping him down, they're going to put him in the flat. What does that do? That stresses the structure of the box because now he has to account for him. And as the motion starts, he's having to rotate. He, who was probably a man-to-man or playing some type of a banjo call, now is suddenly like having to communicate across. What's his fit become? You're making these guys communicate and adjust. So now they're taking the same approach, but now they're working more vertical displacement than horizontal displacement. And so, again, you go back and watch it. Here's this guy that's confident in his coverage because what they're doing is he's man on him. He's man on him. Well, he goes in motion. He's passing it off. He knows he's got somebody over here to collect it. But so what's my job now? Right? And you watch him. He's not sure. We get a blocker to him. And now their fit's completely distorted.
Yeah, he slid right into the trap. Well, left the outside wide open.
Entirely. Well, I mean, they're trying to hit this ball right here or cut it here. Because of the action, as you watch the tight end, as you watch Yeboah come back across, watch the backers fit with it, right? As these guys fit and they pin him with that other receiver on the outside, he's going to press it. If it's there, he's taking it, nothing's there. So he slides all the way out the front side, and they use the motion and the movement to create to stress and distort the structure of the defense.
Yeah.
Similar formation, a little bit different. Now Yeboah is here. Here's 8. Right? So again, bootleg. The difference is when you watch Louisville do this on in the game, they're going to be selling a path that's out here and not a path that is here. So they're going to do even more to stress these guys to move here.
Gotcha.
Right. So now, you're putting guys in a bind now because who's going to run with him? So they were able to get Saban here into one of the man-to-man checks. And now there's nobody to pick up more in the flat. And that's an easy first down call that now turns into a 15, 16-yard gain. You're going to see the same kind of stuff. Whoops, go back real quick. You're going to see the same kind of stuff out of Louisville as you will out of Ole Miss in that respect. It's going to be a lot of little, what we like to call misdirection when we talk about it on television and stuff. And really it is misdirection, but really it's about creating flow and distorting the fit and doing some different things. Okay. Last one I'll show you right here. This again, they've got 3/2 out here, right? You put one of the best receivers in America out here. They have to respect it. Okay. He's man-to-man there. He's starting to make his way down. He knows he has to be part of that fit. If Ole Miss were to run counter this way, he's probably going to spill it. He's going to be over the top and spill it to him. And you're counting on your 87th 5-star safety to make that tackle. Well, what Ole Miss is going to do here is they're going to go to their zone game. And we talk about, go back and I'll get to the end zone right here. We talk about Yeboah, right, being a willing blocker.
Right.
He goes for a little bit of a ride right here. But you're not asking him to take 31 and drive him back. You're asking him to take 31 and wall him off, right? And if you can win here and here and get those bodies into these bodies, you give him a chance now to crease the football. This has become one of the most popular run plays in football. It's old school split zone. You're bringing this guy across. What teams have found is defenses have answers for that. It is harder to answer when you put this guy here and just let him dig that out instead of bringing it across. It also takes a little bit of a lesser player to effectively build this wall, as opposed to a guy that you're asking to scream across, get his head inside, and get movement, right? So every level of football, this has become, especially short yardage runs, it's become very popular, right? So here, boom, he's doing what he can to build the wall. He's trying to get his head inside. He can't get there, so he's trying to press it. There's the combo there. He's trying to take this guard to the ground to create a hole. 47 is getting moved into 32, who's really messed his fit up, should have been here. And I bet he is supposed to be right here. And you see number 8 when the ball snapped, because they have told 31 to get his head here, 8 is playing for the cut back here, but that also puts him in position for the quarterback if Corral were to keep it, right? So because Yeboah wins with his head inside, not because he gets movement, but because he's willing and he doesn't.
Literally, he just gets it a little bit of inside position.
That's it. I mean, you watched. I mean, 31 jacks him up and takes him for a 2-yard ride, right? But your interior players are doing just enough. You've distorted the fit, and it matters that number 8 is out there making you keep a safety over things.
And it helps that number 9 has a gear and it can get to that. Can get to that
without a doubt.
Yeah.
And right there, so I mean, you're looking at probably an 8 or 9 yard run on first down, and in a good spot. So those are the type of things I think you'll see out of both sides of the ball, because like I said, they use a lot of the same tricks to try and play different games. There's probably more disparity between the two defenses from a X and O standpoint than from the offenses. But I think anybody expecting it to be a low scoring game probably made the wrong bet with their bookie.
So last thing I was going to ask you, you kind of walked me into the last question. What kind of a score are you looking for here? And what do you sort of expect from a final score sort of a standpoint?
A lot of times games early in the season, they can be sloppy, right? And sometimes the sloppy shows on offense and sometimes it shows on defense. I think with the level of skill returning for Ole Miss as well as for Louisville, and the unanswered questions on the defensive side of the ball, I don't know if shootout's the right term, but I don't think this is going to be an old school SEC football game. I think there's going to be points on the board. And I'll say this too. I think that one thing about Kiffin, and you see it in his social media, you see it in his press conferences, you see it in everything he does, is he's trying to build the brand and he's constantly trying to recruit, right? You do that by making everyone on television and social media talk about you. Yeah. Whether that's going up top on the first play of the game, whether it's going up tempo and trying to hang 40 in the first half if you can, right? Whatever that looks like, if he has the ability to do it, he's going to. The flip side of that, if you're Satterfield and you're trying to you're taking a program that you feel probably underachieved a little bit last year, and you're trying to really make a name for yourself and be able to recruit more consistently, if you have a chance to take a high-profile coach and a team from the SEC with a high-profile quarterback and put them on their back a little bit, you throw haymakers. You don't sit and throw jabs all night long, right? So I think you add all that up, and I think both teams want this game to be a statement piece. And I don't see that turning into a bad football game. I see it turning into fireworks.
Yeah, the boxing analogy is a good one. It's two fighters that are going to come out with a strategy of, hey, let's go for an early knockout. Let's get after it, which a lot of times leads into the slugfest, and then the fight gets a little sloppy late. But boy, everybody's hurt and all that stuff. Yep. Well, hey, can't thank you enough. I know that the viewers are going to love this, and we'll look forward to doing it again as the season goes along. Thanks so much, Pete.
Thank you. Go Rebs.
That was Pete DeWeese. Now you see why I never do football breakdown pieces on my own. People like Pete do football every day, all day, 365 days, and they know the game better than people in my field, and people in my field make fools of themselves more often than not trying to do that stuff. It was really good. We'll do it all year long with Pete. Next week, we'll be able to look at what did and didn't happen in the Louisville game, and we'll look ahead a little bit to Austin Peay. Now, speaking of looking ahead, we're going to go to Ryan Brown, my good friend at Next Round Live, talk about some of the big games in the SEC this week, including Ole Miss and Louisville. Here's Ryan Brown. My good friend Ryan Brown of the Next Round, kind enough to join us. I know this is, God, we're taping this on Thursday. People are going to see this on Friday morning. This is essentially the beginning of your Thanksgiving, Christmas, Festivus, everything all rolled into one, right? For you, I mean, this is like manna from heaven in a steroid form, injected into your veins.
I do love it. I mean, I personally, for me, like I think a lot of people would say the Thursdays and Fridays of the college basketball tournament or maybe Super Bowl Sunday or whatever is the best sports day of the year. To me, that first Saturday of college football, now I enjoy the Thursday night games and all that, but that first Saturday to me, Neal, is about as good as it gets. I mean, you get to see what teams really are. You know, we frequently get the matchups like a Georgia, Clemson, and Alabama, Miami, and Ole Miss, Louisville, the matchups you aren't used to seeing, UCLA, LSU. It's just, I mean, that's my favorite sports day of the year. Saturday is my favorite day of watching sports on TV all year long. It will not get better than that for me.
Okay, so the MPW Digital Pregame show that we're going to do, what I'm going to get from Ryan is this guy watches so much football, and he sees a lot, and he's able to get analytical. Pete DeWeese is bringing you X's and O's. Ryan's really good at big picture stuff, trends, kind of getting a feel for what's going to happen on a given Saturday. And it's week one, but there are some really interesting games on the SEC slate. I mean, you remember back in the old days, it would be everybody played Sisters of Their Poor.
Right.
So you started off, everybody got 1-0. But look, ULM can only play one team at once on a Saturday. And so Kentucky's got them. So we're not going to go there. I want to get your thoughts, though, on a handful of games around the league that are really fascinating that I think sort of shape some storylines a little bit. And the first one is one that I know you've talked to a lot. You guys had John Michie, the Alabama wide receiver, on your show Thursday. Alabama, Miami, Mercedes-Benz Stadium there in Atlanta. It's the first of the kickoff classic games. Before Ole Miss and Louisville played the second one on Monday night. Manny Diaz has done a really nice job at Miami. He's kind of getting them back on the map. They certainly have more talent. They've made a splash in recruiting. We know about Nick Saban and Alabama, and they've won 27 of the last 21 national titles and all that stuff. But, boy, they've lost so much talent. You keep waiting for there to be the year when you go, well, they did take a step back.
Yeah.
Is there any chance that on Saturday afternoon we're looking at this new quarterback and a lot of new people, very talented guys, but new people playing against a pretty solid program, and that maybe this is a little test for Alabama more so than people think? I mean, the line's 18.5 or something like that, which is a huge line for that game.
Well, I mean, let me answer that two ways, because I think the second part of my answer, a lot of your viewers and listeners will be like, well, of course. But I do think, obviously, Alabama's going to take a step back offensively. I mean, let's be honest about this. Alabama scored almost 49 points per game last year. There's really almost only one way to go from there in the Southeastern Conference, and that's a step backwards. And I don't want this to be misconstrued what I'm about to say, but basically, and we were just talking about this on our show before we finished, basically Bryce Young, from the second half of the 2017 national championship game, when Tua Tagovailoa took over the helm and everybody knew he's the quarterback moving forward, from that point through last year's national championship game against Ohio State, Alabama's not had a hiccup at quarterback. Even the 4 games Mac Jones started in place of the injured Tua Tagovailoa, he performed well. Now, he had a couple of massive turnovers against Auburn, and you can't just say, oh, take those away. But if you do take those away, he's played tremendous football. He was phenomenal last year, best statistical season in the history of Alabama football. I think Bryce Young will not be that guy. I don't think he's just going to step in, pick it up, and even take it a step forward. I think there'll be a little bit of struggle. Now, that is not to say he's going to be bad. And his struggle, the struggle for an Alabama quarterback, I'm still talking, Neal, probably like 41, 42 points per game for Alabama. So I think they're still going to be fine offensively. But here's the part that I think will make a lot of people laugh. The 1 year where you're right, where they lose Landon Dickerson to the NFL, Alex Leatherwood to the NFL, Najee Harris to the NFL, Mac Jones to the NFL, Devontae Smith to the NFL, Jalen Waddle to the NFL, all from that offense. They're probably going to have the best defense Nick Saban has had since probably that 2017 team. So the 1 year, they probably are going to take a step backwards offensively. I think they're going to take a pretty big step forward defensively and have one of the better defenses in the country. So that's just so typical of the Saban era, right? Is once you have a small weakness, you're so strong everywhere else, it doesn't show up.
So you like Alabama pretty big against Miami, I take it. I mean, because there's these, there's rumblings out of Tuscaloosa. We do this all the time that, hey, offensively, they're not quite the same team yet, and blah, blah, blah. And who knows? Because no one sees anything. It is such a talented roster.
Yeah. I think there'll be a backdoor cover by Miami. I think for most of this game, Alabama leads it by, a very comfortable margin. They're probably up fairly big late. Miami scores a late touch. I think that's too many points, but I don't think it's too many points because Miami's that close to Alabama. I just think it's too many points because there'll be a backdoor cover or something like that. So I think probably something along the lines of, 42 to, I'm trying to make the math work here, 42 to
24.
24. Yeah, something like that. It's 42-17 late. Miami gets a late touchdown to get inside the number. I don't like doing math on the fly like that. So that was my problem.
I always just take Alabama to cover, and I assume they will cover until people start proving me wrong, and that is
generally pretty good there. You've made money if you've done that.
For about 10 years, I've just taken Alabama to cover pretty consistently, and for the most part, it works. All right, the team that everyone says, oh, this is going to be the team that finally catches Alabama is Georgia. Give Kirby Smart and company credit. They're not ducking anybody. They opened the season with Clemson right there in week 1 in Charlotte. It's a 6:30 Central Time game on ABC. Georgia, the last I looked, about a 3-point underdog against Clemson. Am I crazy that I'm not just buying this Georgia thing, that I'm a little skeptical, that I'm just like, yeah, I know they're good. I know there's a lot of talent. I know they're going to be a factor in the SEC East and all of that. But Ryan, I think Clemson beats them. Am I missing something?
No, I think Clemson wins this game by 2 scores, Neal. I think they win by 10-14. Yeah, I think Clemson's that much better. And Aaron Murray said something, I guess it was about a week or so ago, the former Georgia quarterback, now CBS, basically said they've not fixed this offense. JT Daniels is better, but it's still the same offense. And that concerns me about what it appears as though Kirby Smart is being a little bit hard-headed, and he's able to survive the East for the most part doing this, but he can't survive long-term doing this, is it feels like he's still trying to win with the 2009, 2010, 2011 Alabama model, where you're going to be really good defensively, you're going to run, you're going to control clock, you're not going to ask your quarterback to do a whole lot, and you're going to make sure you win time of possession, and you're going to play to your defense, right? You're not going to take a whole lot of gambles. And Alabama won a couple national championships doing that. Actually, they won several doing that. And then Nick Saban finally said, that's not the way football's played anymore. I'm going to kind of upgrade my style of football. And it just appears Kirby never upgraded it. And I don't know if it's that, when Lane Kiffin was there and Alabama was kind of making that adjustment, maybe it put Alabama's defense in some tougher spots than they were normally in. And Kirby didn't like that, Kirby didn't like the game.
I hadn't thought about it that way, yeah.
Yeah, Kirby didn't like a game at Bryant-Denny Stadium against Hugh Freeze when, how many points did it take to win that game? Like 49 points? Alabama doesn't play that kind of football then. They could play it now. They did it, last year in Oxford. But they can't play that now, or they couldn't play it then. So, I just wonder if Kirby is so hard-headed about this. We'll see. I get the feeling he is, and that's why I think Clemson wins this game. I like DJ Uiagalelei. I really, really like him. My concern for Clemson is Brent Venables' defense wasn't amazing last year. Solid, just not amazing. And it cost them in a couple spots. It cost them against Notre Dame. They couldn't get Notre Dame off the field and get stops there. It cost them in the playoffs. So, but I still like them. I like them by 10 to 14 points over Georgia.
I'm glad to hear you say that. I was having a conversation with someone the other day. Arch Manning's been in Oxford all week because of the hurricane, and they came up and stuff. And so they saw him out at Oxford High School, and of course, immediately the rumor started that he was transferring to OHS, which he's not. Regardless, someone asked me, what do you think? And they mentioned Georgia, and I said, you know what? look, his decision's going to be bigger than football. But if you told me that Arch Manning looked at offenses and said, boy, Steve Sarkisian's offense is a good fit for me. Boy, Lane Kiffin's offense is a good fit for me. Boy, the Clemson offense is a good fit for me. Boy, even the Alabama offense is a good fit for me. Look at the quarterbacks they've developed. It's kind of hard to argue with, some of these teams. Kirby Smart's offense, the Georgia offense, doesn't make a ton of sense for a quarterback like that right now. I mean, if you're making decisions, I just named 4 programs that make a ton more sense for him as a quarterback than Georgia does.
Yeah, and it's not to match Georgia, but you're right. I mean, there are places he can go and flourish, and it's been proven. You haven't seen that out of a Georgia quarterback. I mean, in fact, the best quarterback they've had in the Kirby Smart era took Ohio State to a national championship game. That's the best quarterback they've had in the Kirby Smart era. And,
they ran him off.
Yeah, ran him off. And look, I understand Kirby was in a tough spot there because you had a long-time starter, but it was abundantly clear, Neal, they didn't put the best guy on the field. They didn't put the best guy out there.
You make millions of dollars to make those calls. I mean, you do. And when you get them wrong, you get them wrong. I'm not trying to, I get Jake Fromm was all that, but you ran off the better quarterback, and he's the first round pick, and he's the guy that's pushing to be a starter in very early in his career in Chicago. All right. LSU, UCLA is the game. I know everyone's talking about Georgia and Clemson, and I get it. I completely understand it, and I'm going to be flipping to it also. But if I got to be honest, the game that I'm locked into Saturday night I don't know why, I'm waiting for you to tell me, no, Neal, you're an idiot. This LSU-UCLA game just gives me all the feels like something could happen, and this thing could be like you know me, I love chaos. I've covered Ole Miss for a long time. I covered Auburn, so I'm naturally drawn to chaos.
You're an agent of chaos,
and I feel like I'm walking right in front of a door, and on the other side of that door is the chaos that I crave to see. And I'm one UCLA win away from it, and I know it was Hawaii. I get it, but I thought UCLA looked better the other day.
Yeah.
They looked like they had something kind of going, and there's a part of me that thinks this could all happen as early as Saturday night.
Well, I am on the opposite side with you. I'm not going to call you an idiot because I'm the one that's on LSU here. But I knew this would happen, though. I knew this would happen.
I know, and I feel like I'm just biting the trap.
Well,
like, there's the trap, and I know it, and I'm like, I got to reach anyway.
So as soon as UCLA was hammering Hawaii, and it became obvious that LSU was going to be displaced, they were going to have to go to Houston, I was like, I know what's going to happen here. This line's at 4.5. The entire world is going to load up on UCLA because UCLA looked good, and they're going to be thinking LSU. They've got all these travel issues. They're worried about their family, all those things. And sure enough, I see, I looked yesterday, I think it was at one point down to 2.5. It dropped 2 points. So obviously, but I heard now we do a weekly segment with Todd Furman from out in Vegas, and he said that was actually a lot of sharp money that was on that. So it wasn't just the general public that jumped on. So I think the sharp money's with you on UCLA. I still like LSU in this situation. I just think too much. Yeah, UCLA looked good. They looked the most like a Chip Kelly offense as they've ever looked. I just think it's going to be such an acceleration in the level of athlete they're facing in LSU. I think things sometimes we think are distractions for teams have a weird way of galvanizing them. And I think this will kind of galvanize the LSU team, getting away from campus, kind of being together in Houston, almost the us against the world mentality that they'll have. I think this will galvanize LSU just a little bit. I like what Max Johnson was doing at the end of the year. Miles Brennan, I hate it for him. Seems like a good kid. He's had a horrible hand dealt to him at LSU, really, when you think about it. I like Max Johnson. I like Keishawn Butte. I don't think there's anybody at UCLA that can keep up with him. I like LSU in this game.
Yeah, I know. I know.
But hey, look, I mean,
people don't believe me when I say this. I just see stories like that I think could get chaotic early, and I'm just so drawn to them. I can't help.
I've got very little faith in Ed Orgeron. Trust me. So I've got Chip Kelly. Even though Ed Orgeron has a national championship, Chip Kelly has been the much better coach, obviously, of those two. I'm just looking at rosters here, and I think it's going to be such a superior roster for LSU. And again, I think the things a lot of people think are distractions, in a weird way will galvanize them. And that's playing on emotion and stuff like that. I shouldn't pay attention to that. I just like LSU in this spot. But I am with you now. I think it's a fascinating game. I am probably more, it's weird as it sounds, I might be more excited about that one than I am Georgia Clemson.
I know I am, so I'm glad we have company. So you know my number. All right, you picked about a week ago on your show.
Yep.
You were asked. I guess you guys were all doing, "Hey, give me a prediction," and so
three guarantees. It's our guarantee. We do a show where all the listeners are invited, and we do it 3 guarantees of the college football season, and we try to be more than just Alabama's going to win the national championship. Vandy's going to have no wins. You try to do something that is kind of off the beaten path.
Yours was Ole Miss related. You said Ole Miss goes 10-2. Lane Kiffin gets SEC Coach of the Year. Why?
Well, the SEC Coach of the Year part might be the crazier part because, as you know, Lane can be a polarizing guy. I'm not sure all his peers feel the same way about him as maybe we do. It's a bold prediction. I'm not going to lie, obviously. I mean, it's going to require Ole Miss. I'm about to contradict what I just said a moment ago. Well, first of all, I think Ole Miss is going to have the best offense in the league. And I think Matt Corral statistically will be the best passer in the league. The Ole Miss defense under DJ Durkin cannot get worse. It can only get better.
Yeah.
And I think it only has to get marginally better if their offense is what I think it is to be a 10-win type team. I mean, he wouldn't have to have a top 40 defense even for Ole Miss to win 10 games.
Oh, no. If you told me that Ole Miss had the 40th best defense in the country, I would, as crazy as this sounds, I would start talking about, wow, they could go 11-1.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I don't think they're jumping from 117 to 40. Let me make that clear.
No. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's still going to catch up with them at some point. I mean, I think now, before I go down the 10-2 road, I think Alabama has this game circled. And I think when they get to Bryant-Denny Stadium, it's going to be different than it was last year. Okay. And again, that goes with the fact I think Alabama's defense is better. I think A&M's better.
Hey, and to your point, to interrupt for a second, to your point, if you're an Ole Miss fan and you hear Ryan Brown say that, and he's got sources inside that program, that's got to get you jacked up that you're back to that place where Alabama circles you.
Well, yeah. I mean, no, you're absolutely right. And I think it was a game where Alabama was embarrassed, even though they won the game by 15. It was a single. I mean, Nick Saban does not take those things well. I know he acts like, hey, it's a game. You forget that when you put that one behind you. When you give up a school record in total offense, that does not sit well with Pete Golding, with Nick Saban, with those Alabama players. And this is a better Alabama defense. I think A&M's a better team than Ole Miss. So I think those will be the 2 games they lose. Now, here's where I contradict myself. I just said I think LSU beats UCLA. I think Ole Miss can beat LSU. I think Ole Miss can beat Auburn. I mean, once you get past Alabama and A&M, if you've got the best offense in the conference, give me the teams on that schedule Ole Miss can't beat, that you would just look at and say, Ole Miss is not in that game. I probably, in hindsight, would have gone 9-3. But I said 10-2, and I do think there is a legitimate path to 10-2.
Boy, be a hell of a story in these parts if they go 10-2, because 10-2 here, they're in the other 2 games. All right, so Ole Miss opens with Louisville Monday night. It's the last game of the big weekend. By this point, everyone will have run through their supply of game changer patches. You'll be on just pure adrenaline. What do you look for, Ole Miss and Louisville?
I need to ask your advice on something too. So let's save time for that.
Okay.
It has nothing to do with the game changer patches, but it has to do with football. I think, Scott Satterfield, and look, I hesitate on judging teams by what they did last year, right? Especially if it's bad, because it was you didn't have complete rosters and things. I'm almost willing to flush just about everything that happened last year. I think Satterfield has been a little bit overmatched in some games. I know people really liked what he did at Appalachian State. I think this will be a time where Ole Miss will shine. That Louisville defense under Brian Brown last year was not a great defense. I think Ole Miss's offense, maybe not up and down the field, but I think this will be a type of 42, 49-point output by Ole Miss. I really, really do. I think on a national stage, a lot of people will watch Matt Corral. It'll be their introduction to him. There'll be a lot of talk, not really about Heisman, but more about his future in the NFL. Lane Kiffin will be a star coming out of this game again. I think this is a great spot for Ole Miss in this game Monday night.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I think it's a springboard for Corral's. Robert Griffin III picks him to win the Heisman. He's got to have so much help from his program to win the Heisman. But listen, I'm a big Corral guy and have been since 2018. I think people are going to get an opportunity to see just what an arm this kid has. And I just got through talking to him a few minutes ago. He is locked in. You can see kids fake it, and there's not a tentative bone in his body right now. He is as dialed in for a football game and a season as I've seen quarterback in a long time. I mean, he's everything's ready to roll. So if he can stay healthy, I think he has a special season.
Yeah, good. I'm excited for him, and I like Lane. I liked Lane when he was here. I like that Ole Miss program. I like Corral. So I'm excited to see him, and I hope he does play well. And on the Heisman thing, it's such a team award as well. I mean, a 10-2 Ole Miss team, well, that would be a fantastic year for Lane Kiffin. On a national scale, Spencer Rattler, he could be, on an undefeated team. DJ could be on an undefeated team at Clemson. So it becomes such a team award. It would be hard for him to win it. And I don't even look at that for him. I just think people will start talking about his NFL future, which is obviously great for him.
Yeah, I think for him to win the Heisman, not to get invited. I think 10-2 gets him invited to New York.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah.
I think for him to win the Heisman, and again, this is talking in a vacuum, which is impossible because other things happen in other places, but he would almost have to lead them to 11-1.
Yeah.
And that's a really tall order. But listen, I think he can have a really special season. I think he can have an All-American caliber season. I think he can force his way into the conversation where people like you and me are having this conversation again in November. So what's the advice that I can give you? What's the advice that Neal McCready can give the great Ryan Brown?
Okay, so Sunday night, I love college football. I love college football. And the creation of this Sunday night game, I think has been genius. You've got the stage to yourself. I think Notre Dame, Texas was the first one they did. They got massive ratings. Florida State, I don't know about. Notre Dame, I think it's going to be an okay team. I'm also a big fan of the Black Crows. Okay. They are in concert at Oak Mountain Sunday night, 8:00. My choice is, do I stay home and watch Notre Dame, Florida State, or do I assume right now I'm going to see so much college football I can do without that game and go to the Black Crows? I'm leaning Black Crows. Would that be your advice to me?
Yeah. One critical question here is just a qualifier. Your wife, I assume, is planning to go to the concert with you?
Yeah. She loves them too. And let me add one more piece of information. As a kid in high school, I literally played the Shake Your Moneymaker cassette tape until the tape broke. Okay, that's honest to goodness truth. The tape literally finally just gave way and said, I'm done, and broke. And then I got the CD. They're doing Shake Your Moneymaker. It's the Shake Your Moneymaker tour. They're doing that whole album. And to me, it's one of the greatest albums. Seeing Things, She Talks Angels, Jealous Again. All those are on Shake Your Moneymaker. So they're doing the hits. I know. And my wife is a fan as well. I got to do this.
This is a no-brainer.
I think so.
You DVR the game, and if the game's great, you can get up early Monday morning, and you could watch it at 5 a.m. with the fast forward thing. If you ever want your wife to shake her moneymaker for you, I would suggest that you go to the concert Sunday. You'll see plenty of football on Saturday, and listen, good Lord willing, there's going to be plenty of football weeks ahead too. So this is not a complicated conversation.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I just needed the affirmation. So that's definitely what I'm doing. I'm going to shake your moneymaker and Black Crows. So next week, do not ask me about Florida State and Notre Dame.
I will not ask you about that game. For some reason, I don't think that's really going to be on the front of my mind anyway. All right. Well, enjoy the weekend of football. Thanks for being with us. Enjoy the Black Crows. You tell the wife that that she's welcome, that I steered you and finally pushed you over.
Thank you.
So have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, Neal. Always fun. Enjoy the games, man. Thanks.
That was Ryan Brown. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Always enjoy visiting with him. So we went over some of those SEC games. I'm going to make sure that the audio works on this. For those of you who want to see the SEC slate, it's ULM and Kentucky. That's the 11 a.m. game Saturday. Rice is at Arkansas. That's only streaming on ESPN+. A lot of eyes on KJ Jefferson there in Fayetteville. We mentioned Alabama, Miami. Louisiana Tech at Mississippi State. That game's a 3 p.m. game on ESPNU. Central Michigan, Missouri kickoff at the same time on the SEC Network. Auburn, a more than 5 touchdown favorite over Akron on ESPN Plus. Eastern Illinois and South Carolina. We talked about Georgia and Clemson. FAU is at Florida. Kent State at Texas A&M. Could be a little interesting to get our first eye on a Texas A&M offense without Kellen Mond. East Tennessee State at Vanderbilt, if you're watching that, God bless you. And then, of course, LSU at UCLA. And then Monday, it's Ole Miss and Louisville. We talked a lot about conference affiliations and conference realignment and all of those things. It's one of the big storylines going into this season. I talked about that and more with Jeffrey Wright of 92.9 ESPN in Memphis. So take a listen. Jeffrey Wright, 92.9 FM ESPN in Memphis. He is the producer of the Jeff Calkins Show. He's the executive producer. Holy
Thank
shit.
you.
Don't want to get that wrong. Good God. He is the, to my knowledge, the co-host of
I'll allow it.
Jeffrey and Giannato. Is it Giannato and Jeffrey?
It's Giannato and Jeffrey, yes.
I'm just going to call it Jeffrey and Giannato. I like Mark fine, but you were there first.
Again, this was we did it in alphabetical order while also manipulating the rules, because we would have done it purely if we called it like Jeffrey and Mark, it should have came alphabetically. But I believe that was a stipulation for the commercial appeal to allow Mark on the airwaves.
Well, that's petty. But yeah, okay.
Well, I don't know if you know this, Neal. We've got a newspaper war going on right now, and we got a newspaper war on when one newspaper delivers 3 times a week and the other does not have a print form. But we got a massive newspaper war going on.
How is there a war? I mean, newspapers are dead. How is there a war between 2 of them in the same market?
Have you ever met journalists?
Yeah, I know plenty of them. Yes.
Mm-hmm. You know how they all believe that they're doing God's work?
Yeah, I'm aware.
Yeah, it's
God's work if God had quite the agenda.
God's work.
Yeah, there you go.
Mm-hmm. Telling the truth that we want.
Yeah. The truth is they want you to know it. That's American media today. All right, college football's here. By the time
can I do one more quick plug?
Yeah, sure.
So because I just have to copy you, I've gotten into the live stream game, except I'm not doing it on my own. Starting Friday at, I'm not sure when this airs. I'm not sure if this is game day or whatever.
This will air on Friday.
So this will air on Friday on demand on the Odyssey app. You can also go to the Odyssey YouTube page. It's called BetQLU. I'll have an hour show with RJ Choppy from The Fan in Dallas. We'll be previewing the weekend. And then from 3 until 7 Central Time PM, obviously on Saturdays, we will have BetQLU in the action, in which that's a 4-hour live stream of, if you've ever watched the Barstool, videos, like from the Gambling House and whatnot, it's a similar premise, except we're going to have graphics, and it'll be more of a traditional, it'll be the traditional format of a radio stream, like online television show or whatever. I don't even know, it's not television, but online video, whatnot. But that will be from 3 till 7. Obviously, I'll tweet out all the links and I'll have all that, but you can catch me on that. There'll be obviously live bullets, keeping you in mind of, we'll let you know if we're up or down that day. Are we having to put together a 17 parlay to save the day with the nightcap? We're excited about it. So that launches this Saturday. So if you ever want to watch that, if you want to check in, that's where I'll be on Saturdays.
All right. Well, send me that link. We'll put it on the message board and all of that stuff as well.
Oh, that's my people.
Some of them are. Some of them are not.
I do occasionally enjoy, because I'm still a consumer of the content, because I like to read Neal and my friends still run the website. I do just love when out of nowhere during the middle of the summer, there's a Jeffrey sucks thread. Like, okay. Like, I mean, first off, like, it doesn't, like, I am like, Neal can actually confirm, I really don't care. It just confuses me. It's like, where did that come from?
They do that with you. And with me, I get the handful of people that don't like my conservative leanings that say I'm Clay Travis wannabe. And frankly, I'm not insulted by the comparison to Clay Travis as much as I am well, if I wanted to be Clay Travis and I was trying to be Clay Travis, if I've been here for 13 years, you would think at this point that you would think that I was smart enough to do it better than I supposedly did it, because I own a podcast network. No, rivals.com would not like me writing nothing but politics. But
furthermore, you own an established podcast network, because I think what we're seeing now is, it used to be when we first started the show, and I would tell people, well, I'm a podcaster, multimedia guy. Like, let's be real. Most people were thinking, oh, so you're unemployed. Like that's like, at the time, it was either you were Adam Carolla or you were someone that didn't have a job and was trying to, I mean, I don't knock anyone that tries to hustle, because the truth is, podcasting's the main thing now with podcasting, especially for young people that want to get into this space. Podcasting is how you build a resume and build a reel. Like, you're not going to build probably an audience. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. Without some type of crossover exposure or someone pushing you from a promotional standpoint, the space has just gotten too crowded. But we were unique in the situation where we were in a state that is very passionate about sports, but it doesn't really have a sports talk community. And you were a pro, and it wasn't like there was some grand idea. It kind of happened by happenstance. And then it just started, well, if they like this, let's see if we can talk some more, and then some more and some more and some more. But, you know, now I don't think someone, like, let's say we took Neal McCready, the exact same, but you didn't have 10 years of building this.
Mm-hmm. It wouldn't work.
I don't think you'd be as successful. Do you?
No, not at all. I'll give you an example, and I'll be careful here. I won't name names. I've had someone approach me about doing an SEC podcast.
Sure.
Not SEC and beyond, but an SEC podcast. And it's an established brand that is interested in advertising it, sponsoring it, title sponsoring it. And a brand that's not on the network today. It's a national brand. And initially it was like, well, you guys don't have and I said, well, I do. And when I showed them numbers, it was like, oh, and I don't know whether they're going to do it or not. I have no idea.
Sure.
We're still talking money and all that stuff. But the fact that I was able to say, well, I mean, I could put it in an established stream, in an established feed, and that feed has these numbers. Immediately, a national brand went from, oh, you guys are you're just a dude in Mississippi, to wait, you have what numbers? And it's like, yeah, we've been doing this for that long. And so you establish deals. So to my point about,
well, I'll expand on this. I'll expand on this a little bit. You may not remember this, but when we were additionally looking, like, we knew what we had. We had, this is probably 2015, summer of 2015, 2014. We were getting every episode, even during the dead summer, we were getting at the time 30,000 downloads each and every episode, if not more. Like, that was the floor.
Yeah.
And so I approached Podcast One, which is Mike August. That's Adam Carolla's manager. Like, that's all of them. And when I threw the numbers at them, well, like, they were like I think they kept thinking they were trying to figure out a way to say no the whole time. But we fit. But the problem was, he's like, well, it's too regional. It's too regional. I go, I remember just going back and forth. I was like, you people like money. We have 30,000 people per day. And God knows what it is now. This is way back then. We have 30,000 people per day. 95% of them are men. Like
92.
I'm sorry. We've grown that. We've really grown that female base.
We really have.
Yeah, man, boy. I mean, exponentially, you're talking there, massive.
Yeah, I know. It's a big difference.
But it just is fascinating how, I don't think I do any better or worse than I worked with you every single day. It just blows my mind that just because I'm a radio guy now versus a podcaster, like it's easier. And it's, to me, like that's backwards. Like, and I think that's a problem going forward.
Yeah, I don't know, but I was going to say this about the comparison to Clay. It was funny to me because I said, well, but if I were trying to be Clay, wouldn't it have made sense that, especially during a pandemic when hell there was nothing else to do, I would have just doubled down, tripled down, quadrupled down on political stuff, on COVID stuff. I mean, I have an opinion on COVID that is pretty popular with Clay's audience. I didn't really do it. So I tell people when they say, well, you're just trying to be Clay Travis, I'm like, man, if I were trying to be Clay Travis, then I'm really bad at what I'm doing, because I would have, if I wanted to try to be Clay Travis, and make no mistake, I'm not as talented as Clay. I'll freely admit that. But I would have.
I mean, I think it's a different type of thing. But I mean, I get what you're saying.
But I would have tried a lot harder than I quote tried end quote. It just anyway. All right.
Well, here's the thing though that kind of fascinates me about this. If you put Clay Travis's opinions actually on paper, now I think there's a tough issue of what does Clay Travis, the citizen, versus what does Clay Travis, the public persona, believe. I don't know if he likes to claim he's authentic. I think he's probably closer to what he is as an individual than what he portrays. But I still think, like almost everyone in this business, like you turn it up a little bit. But if you actually put it down on paper, he gets labeled as a far right extremist. I mean, you're talking pretty dead center.
Yeah. I view him as just more of a common sense guy.
I think what it displays is, and to what you're talking about, you experiencing a part of it. It used to be you had the marketplace of ideas and that you debated. If I disagreed with you, we would, particularly in education, we could take it to the debate and let put it up to may the best idea win, best theory win. And it's judged by your peers. Well, now it's become such a team sport. And I remember talking about this with you when we were covering the 2016 election and how politics has just become a team sport. And no one really actually thinks about the position. It's whether or not you're on my team, whether or not you're on their team. And there's this deal of anytime I disagree with what you say, I have to label you as something. So Clay Travis has to get labeled as racist. Clay Travis has to get labeled as sexist. Dave Portnoy has to get labeled as misogynist. It's funny how the other side doesn't have to get labeled.
And you just nailed them. That's and those used to be like canceling words, and now a lot of people are like, label me what you want. I have a body of work. I mean,
right.
And so they just kind of move on, and we've become as a media, and frankly as a society, incredibly polarized. And so there's everyone's on the two sidelines and no one's in the middle of the field. And yeah, I think the fact that Travis, for example, a guy who once worked on Al Gore's campaign,
I mean, until the previous election, I believe he had never voted for a Republican.
Right. The fact that he gets labeled some hardcore right-wing nut job.
Right. He's no different than what's her face, whatever, Marjorie Taylor, whatever, in Georgia.
I think it's a reflection more on how far the other side has
completely agree
shifted to the left. All right, let's get to football because it's football season and people want to hear about football. And I want to get.
Oh, so you want to talk Tiger basketball?
Tomorrow we will get to Tiger basketball on our show tomorrow.
Okay.
All right. So I get the sense, and tell me if I'm wrong, that this college football season has a chance to be more interesting on a number of levels than any season we've had in a long time for two reasons. One, we're back to something resembling normal. And
well, let me stop you right there, Neal. We cannot. This virus is still here. and it's not over. So just because you think it is.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, it's true. Everyone's going to die, and we're not going to play. We're back to normal. The teams are going to play. Like Ole Miss is 100%. They're not even going to test. So we're back to something resembling normal. And then we have all of this stuff in the landscape. Texas and Oklahoma have declared we're out. Yeah. We'd like to get out next year. It might be 2 years. Hell, it might be 4 years, but we're out. We're out. Big 12, you've been served. And now these Big 12 schools that are left over, the irate 8, are all irate, and they're looking for a home. The Pac-12 has said,
typically when you get dumped, you're usually pretty irate.
You're pretty irate, and you start looking for a home. You can only sulk and eat ice cream for so long. You eventually kind of.
Well, it's the problem of when you started dating the hot chick when y'all were in 5th grade, and she stuck with you really for no reason. And then finally, when she turned 17, someone like went up to her and was like, "Hey, you know you're hot, right?" And you know that he's, I don't know, let's just say 5'7 3/4, weighs 164 pounds, and has a nasally, infuriating accent. And you like don't like, what are you doing? Like you can do better. Like, this isn't even like a ploy. Like, this is when everyone's like in the room going, why is she with him? Like, it's that. And now
that was awfully specifically random.
I just pulled it out of thin air. Yeah. And then you have to deal with the reality of, like I got a great deal for a really long time, and now I've got to go on the open market. And what you find is that everyone doesn't like to find out what they're worth on the open market.
And so going into this season, the Pac-12 has said, well, we're not going to expand, but we're going to form an alliance, kind of, sort of. And the Big Ten's kind of looking around like, what are we doing? And the ACC's in panic mode. Meanwhile, the SEC is just doing the SEC thing, kind of just going, hey, in 2 years, we're going to be
ruining the sport.
We're going to be just counting money. And I think as the season goes on and as we get out of this initial portion of, hey, isn't it great? We're playing football again. I think it's going to get really contentious fast. I think it's going to get really bitter, sarcastic, nasty over the course of the next few weeks. And I think by the time November rolls around, a lot of people are going to be sick of each other.
So here's what I think is the most, at least potentially entertaining aspect of all of this that I don't feel like has gotten discussed or publicized really. Texas and Oklahoma still have voting rights in the Big 12.
Yeah.
And like they can basically hold up anything they want. And I think it's going to be interesting to see. Oklahoma and Texas are in a tough spot because I think you are right. If they want to be button pushers and they want to be agitators, I think they could. And they could do it. I mean, in the end, like they can bully because they do hold the power. Like,
sure,
if they're done, the conference is done. As you and I said the day that they left. Like, and when people are like, what are you talking about? There's still plenty of good people. Like, no, we both said they're dead. Like, forget it. Like,
that's it. But to your point, BYU is interested in maybe joining, and Texas and Oklahoma could say, all right, well, here's the deal. You want them in? Great. We'll let them in, but you're letting us out. We'll let them in. But if you're going to hold our feet to the fire, we're going to vote no on BYU.
Right.
And that's going to hold that up. And
and by the way, you're going to have to deal with the PR that comes with BYU.
Yeah, and the day's coming in 4 years because there is a specific drop dead date. June 30th, 2025 is the last day that they are contractually obligated as of this moment to still be in the league. And the literal minute that ends, they're out. And they're in the SEC, and it's done. And what's left of your league is just this burning rubble. And I think as this football season gets started, those schools in the Big 12 are going to look at Texas, look at Oklahoma, and start looking at themselves and going, petty is a really good strategy until you put it in play. and then it's time to get out.
So here's the only one complicating factor, because I do agree from the emotional and the practical aspect of it. I think that's correct. I think what's getting overlooked at this point is, I mean, this is the guy that's on his last contract. He knows it's his last big deal, and like there's incentive for him to ride it out until he can literally go no more.
Sure.
So the simplest answer, in my opinion, is there a number that satisfies the irate 8 and satisfies Texas and Oklahoma? Is there a number at some point where they go, because in the end, like this is going to end the same way, one way or the other. It's going to end with Texas and Oklahoma cutting them a check. The question becomes, when do they cut that check and what is it for?
How big is it? Yeah.
And the issue, though, that I see, if you're the Big 12, it would be one thing. Like, it's a lot easier to take the settlement if you know there's going to be another revenue stream. And I'm not saying that the remaining members can't go and get in a conference. But what we saw with first off, the gentleman's agreement with the alliance.
Yes.
A deal amongst gentlemen that looked him in the eye. I thought the most telling aspect of that entire thing was the Big 12 matters. Not to us, but it matters. We just want everyone to know that we are not doing what, obviously, if Texas and Oklahoma would have called us, obviously, we totally would have taken them. But because they didn't call us, we are in a unique position to take the moral high ground and act like we would not have done exactly what they did, because duh. And so they're going to be in this weird spot where they don't have a television deal. Their television deal is expiring, and we've just eliminated the only media entity that has been consistently proven to overpay for college sports. The other media entities have been consistent in their intention to overpaying for the NFL.
Yeah.
But they have not in college. In the end, like let's take a look at how we got here. In the middle of the pandemic, Fox, CBS, and ESPN are all sitting in a room with the SEC's agent, CAA, and every single person in that room had the intention of winning that bid. CBS and Fox looked at each other and said, how are they doing that?
Yeah.
We can't do that. Like they're sitting there. And, by all accounts, they made multiple calls to find out, is there any way we can go higher and higher? And finally, someone said, no, we do not have the cash to go higher and higher. And ESPN's literally just sitting there with all the chips, like, we will go as high as you want. I know everyone likes to think ESPN paid all of that because they knew Texas and Oklahoma were coming. I do think they knew Texas and Oklahoma were coming.
I do too.
I think that there is not a number. I do not think that ESPN was going to leave that room without the SEC deal. And in the end, it's because they have more cash.
I think ESPN Disney knew that they're probably never going to get the NFL contract. Or never is a big word. I hate that word.
They're not going to get the AFC NFC deal.
Right. So I think they looked at it and they saw the writing on the wall. They saw the very real possibility that the college football landscape of the future is very similar in terms of the way that it plays out to the current NFL. It might not be.
Well, I think I'll even stop you there, because here's what I think they did. I think they took a look at the top 50 broadcasts of the previous 5 years.
Yeah.
And they said, well, it's very obvious. If we can't have the NFL, there's one thing that keeps showing up on this list, not sports broadcasts.
It's SEC. Yeah.
Big brain college football.
Yeah.
Give us that, and we're going to become the dominant, and we're going to turn that into, I mean, for God's sakes, every playoff game outdrew the Oscars.
Yeah. I mean, well, you look at big time television sports, you have the NFL, you have, and I'm talking globally here.
Sure.
You have the English Premier League.
Yep.
And then you have big time college football.
Yes.
And big time college football is the SEC frankly, it was Texas and Oklahoma, a handful of Big Ten games, and Notre Dame. That's college football. And so the SEC,
SC still is I know we make the jokes, but if SC says we're available,
yes,
they're going to have plenty of dates.
That's why ultimately I when people ask me, and I get it all the time, and we live in a very fast news cycle. Just look at this week, for example. It's late Thursday, and the media is already tiring of Afghanistan, which is the biggest story in years, and it happened just a few days ago.
Well, I don't even think they're tiring. I think they don't want to talk about it.
But you know what I mean? They're kind of moving on. So I get people that go, so nothing's happened in 4 days. And I'm like, I'm just telling you, it might be 4 years, but there's movement because there's too many things happening under the surface in college athletics for nothing to happen. Now,
it's going to be like anything else. You have to wait for all these people to realize, wait a minute, they're getting $60 million, and I'm supposed to sit here for the good of everyone else and accept 25 or 30 later.
Yeah, Henry's guy sits in that room and goes, "Now wait a minute. So you're telling me that Mississippi State is going to get $60 million a year for 10 years, and we're going to get $23 million a year for those 10 years. Hold on, let me do the math. No. That's what's going to happen. And so ultimately, the day, and I've said this repetitively, the day that I read the pro rata story, I went, oh God, it's all blowing up. And I still think it is. I just think those schools are going to look at, I think the Big Ten can survive. I think the ACC has this contract that hangs over everybody's head, but contracts are made to be broken. I don't know what happens with the Big 12. The I-8 doesn't matter anymore. I think there's going to be an NFL-style college football organization by the turn of this decade, 2030.
Yeah, I think the question, I'm with you. The Big Ten, if the Big Ten wants to play ball, they can survive. And if you don't believe that, I'm sorry, like that's you being a Southerner that thinks SEC football. In terms of brand, they can.
Yeah.
The thing that was fascinating, though, about that alliance is they've been kind of the point men of saying, we're trying to get this back to the way that it was.
Yeah.
And we're not cool. Like, in the end, what they kept saying is they wouldn't come out and say it, but what they're really mad at the SEC for is the SEC, when Brett Kavanaugh ripped the NCAA a new asshole, the SEC read the writing on the wall and they said, all right, this is going one way or another. This is where it's headed. It's headed to a professional model. We can label it however we want to label it. We'll figure out the terminology, but like, let's get real in the room here. We're moving to a professional model. And we have got to figure out a way to make sure we're at the front of that. Because if we're at the front of that, everyone's going to want to be involved because that's where the best players are going to go. And everyone knows where the best players go. That's where the best football is going to be played. And that's where we make our money. And then the Big Ten is sitting there going, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, we're not cool with that. And we need to figure out a way to maintain the student athlete model, make sure that intercollegiate athletics stay intercollegiate. And then they did this like veiledly racist thing where they started like, maybe not veiledly racist, inadvertently racist, where they were basically saying like, we are going to be the home for people that are first generation college student athletes and whatnot. It's like, wait a minute. Like, so you're telling poor kids, like, you're the right way to do, that's so like high and mighty and elitist. Like, that's really weird. But the bigger reality is by taking that approach, good luck in court. You're getting smoked each and every day.
Every single time. Yeah. All right. Let's touch some games. I want to get your thoughts on some week 1 games that are out there. We'll touch on some SEC ones in a minute, but I want to get some national games that I think are interesting. And no one's really talking about it as a national game, but Texas is in the spotlight for all the reasons we just talked about. Louisiana Lafayette's coming in. Billy Napier has either not taking jobs or taking his name out of jobs or been unable to get jobs, whatever you want to do with Billy.
I'll go first. I don't believe it.
I can't help but wonder if there's something, but I've heard nothing, so I don't know. I mean,
the only thing that's made any sense to me is that he is waiting for LSU. With that being said, how many years have you covered this?
This be my 25th year, something like that.
How many times have you seen someone at a school equivalent to a Lafayette that waits?
It works out very rarely. But now it's working for him so far.
I mean, he's getting. All right.
They get Texas Saturday, mid-afternoon game. So on national television, Lafayette's only about a 8-point dog. Can ULL beat Texas in the opener in Austin?
I mean, can they? Yeah. I mean, Texas is starting a freshman quarterback. I mean, are you telling me if Texas loses the turnover battle by 3 or 4, like Louisiana's Lafayette? I'm not going to get into this trap. You know how I feel about it. It drives me insane that they try to do that. Like, it's literally against the law for you to call yourself the University of Louisiana.
ULL.
Now, some people can argue if it's Louisiana law, is that really the law? Which I would say that's a fair counterpoint.
That's fair.
What I think Napier has done well, I think he's gotten those kids from Louisiana, East Texas, and kind of that area, that South Louisiana, East Texas, like the parts that even if it's like on a map in Texas, it's still kind of Louisiana. Those kids that LSU kind of passes on, he's done a great job of getting those kids to ULL. And those kids, like that used to be, State would get a kid from there. Ole Miss would get a kid from there. I mean, hell, sometimes that'd be an Auburn kid. That'd be, a South Carolina kid and whatnot. He's done a great job of getting those guys and building a roster. So it's not as if his roster is, this true G5. Like he has some guys that are going to play NFL football on his roster, but I don't know if he has enough of them. And if you look at last year and you look at who they played and who they beat, like I know everyone wants to point to that Iowa State game, but like there's a kickoff return. There were like 2 big, massive plays, and it kind of flipped that game. Also, I'm someone that is in this camp of, I think Matt Campbell's greatness is how consistently his team plays. But let's not mistake that roster for, Ohio State. I mean, come on.
Close. Nowhere close.
Like he's had some pros and he's had some, they've done a good job of developing some bodies, but let's get real. Like that's not that type of roster. I think this is like the classic Sarkisian. I really kind of think he's going to have them ready to go. And I think as long as they don't turn it over with Hudson Carr, this kind of reeks to me like the 21-point win in a ranked game. And everyone at ESPN is going to be resisting the urge to go, can we say it? Can we say it? Or are we still worried about having a testator moment? Like, can we say Texas is back? Like,
they're back.
Yeah. And I don't think Texas is back, but at the same time, I know Texas is down, but I kind of thought Herman, you remember this all along. Like, even when he was the flavor of the week, I'm like, I'm not a Herman guy. I don't believe in what he does. And I think Sarkisian, that staff he's put together, like, I think they're going to be ready. And I think they know this is their debut.
Can UCLA beat LSU? They looked awfully good against Hawaii, and that was Hawaii. But they looked,
yeah.
And
so I watched pretty much every snap of that. Can they find another quarterback other than Dorian Thompson-Robinson? Because I don't know if you checked out the team talent rankings, not the recruiting rank, but it ranks the roster.
LSU up there,
number 5.
Yeah.
If I said LSU is going to South Carolina this week, and the line is 3, what would you be doing?
Laying every point I've got.
UCLA's roster is neck and neck with South Carolina's roster in terms of team talent. Now, I'm also not going to act like that's similar. Here's where UCLA is good. Their offensive line is a good offensive line.
Yeah.
I have no idea about their defense. I know, like, I can tell you this. That Hawaii team, they are awful. I mean, like they couldn't do anything. I mean, they were truly awful. I do think there is a inherent advantage in playing a full game when your opponent has it. Like, I just think, because we've seen so many game ones that just get so weird. I think he cut down on penalties, particularly like procedural stuff. Like, I think you get lined up better. And I think that Kelly will be able to probably get some alignment, big plays against LSU. The big question, though, is, I mean, LSU is still going to have dudes. And I know that the whispers are their front is not as good this year, and maybe not as talented. I still imagine they're going to be bigger, stronger, and faster. And the one thing that's always blown up Chip Kelly's offense is when they go up against SEC defensive linemen, he creates a lot of havoc. And I think my biggest question with LSU is, I do not buy into the whole, it was only Bo Pelini's fault. Like, Bo Pelini, like, there's no, like, don't take this as a defense of Bo Pelini. Like, he was an idiot. But let's not act as if that was entirely his fault. I mean, in the end, are you telling me the head coach couldn't go in and say, hey, maybe why don't we try some cover 4? Because then what's he doing being your head coach? And then furthermore, I never saw LSU run a play with Joe Brady as the co-OC or whatever his title was, passing game coordinator. I never saw a football play that I go, man, I've never seen that before. I'll tell you what I did see about 20 to 25 times when I watched LSU play that year. Holy hell. How did he make that throw?
Yeah, it was Burrow. Yeah.
Everyone, the wrong Joe got the credit. Now, the other Joe got to be the number 1 pick and whatnot. But, you know, it was this whole Joe Brady's a wonder kid and a wizard. It's like, no, the wizard is number 9. Like, that guy's the wizard. He's able to, when you run the offense that they're going to run, which is oftentimes a lot of empty formation, it means that you're probably going to have to make one of the guys rushing. The quarterback is going to have to make him miss, and he is going to have to make downfield throws, oftentimes into tough coverage, where tough angles, you're on the move, whatnot. Well, that was Burrow that whole year. I mean, he was ridiculous at it. Can Max Johnson do that? I mean, I don't think he's nearly as athletic. From what I watched of Max Johnson last year, I didn't see a bad athlete, but I saw someone that has his dad's feet more than his mom's feet. And Brad Johnson was a hell of an athlete. He was a college basketball player in addition to being a college football player, but I didn't see soccer feet out there.
Yeah.
I saw someone that was clearly athletic enough, but I don't know. Like, to me, can UCLA win that game? Sure. Because, I mean, if I tell you Ed Orgeron loses a game that he should have won, are you that stunned?
No, not even a little bit.
So can they? I think I'll be laying them.
All right, last couple of things I want to get to. Going into the season, are you more focused on Oklahoma or Ohio State?
You know how I feel about those wonderful young men up in Columbus that do nothing but worship the Lord, read the word, play football, and go to class.
Yeah.
Those men of high moral fiber and integrity are some of the finest young men that I've ever seen. And the fact that I've only got to lay 14 against, like, that is absurd to me.
It's
like,
a great line. I know. I'm itching to get to that game on Friday night.
I mean, Thursday night.
Was it Thursday night?
It's probably already aired. Yeah.
Yeah. So by the time people hear this, they'll know.
Here's what I really love about that game. Are you really telling me deep down, Ryan Day, if he gets the chance to maybe tack one more on against PJ Fleck, who is pretty much the college football version of Bryson DeChambeau in that everything he does is annoying. Like if you're on his team, like you love him, but like he's annoying. Like everything about him is aggravating and annoying. And are you really telling me that that Ryan's gonna sit there and go, no, inside zone. Let's get out of here.
I think I'm trying to pile it up.
Something tells me that I just really want to see one time. I want to see someone just pulverize Minnesota and then do the Austin Powers miming of the canoe and rowing the boat. Like, I just want to see like the whole team doing that. It would just make me so happy. And I believe in those kids from Columbus to do that.
All right, last one. We hadn't talked about Ole Miss. What do you expect from Ole Miss on Monday night against Louisville?
I don't know. So here's my question. How is Ole Miss, and I trust Kiffin, like I said, as I pointed out like a couple of years ago, like this is a guy that found a way to get Amari Cooper into the Heisman conversation. And literally, like, unlike a supposed genius, he found a way to get him the ball literally 20 times a game. And this was a guy that the next year, I'm going to get Derrick Henry the ball and get him the Heisman trophy. Like this, it doesn't really matter. I just really have questions about replacing Elijah because good God, what a football player he was. And I know Jerry and Ely, I know there's a lot of good vibes surrounding him. But Neal, we've seen him get hurt before.
Yeah, I'm as interested to see what Ole Miss does with Henry Parrish as I am Ely. And I know they're similar players, but they're not the same player.
No, I think Parrish is a better runner.
I think he might be a better runner with the ball in his hands in space, and that's what Kiffin does.
Said a better ball carrier. I don't know if runners, but Ely's obviously, but I'm talking about, I think he's a better pure running back.
So I'm curious just to sort of see what he does. He has different weapons. And to your point, that's the magic of Kiffin, if you will, is that no matter what team he has, he figures out, okay, well, this is what we do well, and this is what this guy does well, and I'm going to build my offense around them. I think the man has a massive ego, like most coaches, but I don't think his ego is such that it's like, okay, we're going to run my system, and I'm going to put these people in my system, and they're going to run it. Instead, I think he goes, I have this malleable, pliable system, and I'm going to shape it sort of like Play-Doh or something to fit these pieces, and then we're going to make that work. We're going to figure out how to make that.
Yeah, so I would say his ego is in himself. Like his belief is in himself.
Sure.
Whereas, I don't know, the other offensive genius that was there, his belief is obviously in himself, but most importantly, his system.
Yes.
Like he believes in his offense and whatnot.
Yeah, it's big.
And it was a lot of times it was square peg, round hole.
Yeah.
And it was, by God, like, this is what we're going to do. By the way, did you see Jordan Wilkins made an NFL roster again?
Saw that.
It's amazing how he couldn't.
Let me tell you what impressed me about Kiffin last year was the Outback Bowl.
Yep. Where he had no weapons.
When they were all hurt. It was just Matt Corral and Casey Kelly and John Rice Plumlee and Snoop Connor and Henry Parrish. That's about it. I guess Mingo was there. I mean, he had to throw. Jaden Jackson hadn't played all year. Suddenly he's running routes.
I mean,
and they still made it work against a really good defense that Indiana had. I mean, I know Kane Womack. I know they had a good plan, and Kane has a good team, and they kind of dominated that side of the ball. It was the most impressive thing I saw all year.
Yeah, I mean, I think I also thought the way Corral played that game was wildly impressive because we've seen at other points in time, particularly in that season, and this is not picking on him, but he'd look in the huddle and he'd go, shit, it's on me. Like, I've got to do something. I thought that was the game that he was the most patient. He never made the, oh shit play. Like, where it breaks down and he just kind of freaks out and he tries to make something happen. I thought he stayed within himself the entire afternoon and he fought his guts out. And then, he didn't make any mistakes. And then when it came time, we've got to put a drive together. was a hell of a drive.
Yeah, he led. I thought it was a monumental moment for him. It's one of the reasons that I'm super high on him going into this season. I think
it's an interesting matchup on Monday for this. People that cover Louisville, and again, Louisville's kind of a little bit of a weirder beat in that not everyone there, but there's definitely some protect the program people, if you will. But I think there's some, I've read some people that I like how they cover it. Most believe that Scott Satterfield is a good coach that gets kind of bad advice. Like he's almost too honest, like, and whatnot. And so that snowballed and spun on them. But most people believe, if you go back and look, they weren't really that bad last year as maybe the perception was. But it's a fascinating game because, you know, as you've pointed out for years and years and years, student athletes are human beings. And it will be fascinating. What if Ole Miss jumps up on them quickly?
Sure.
And, you know, everything you read during the offseason was, man, he wanted to go to South Carolina? Like, really? Like, are you able to rally him? And I think it's easier in game 1 probably than it'll be in game 4 or 5. But it'll be fascinating to me to see if that is the opportunity where, I mean, you know, Kiffin's not exactly going to push the brakes. I mean, it's Monday night. He's the only team playing. He's going to, as long as there's gas in the tank, he's going to be pushing the accelerator.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to me to see if Louisville can, I think Satterfield can come up probably with a game plan that might be able to make it more interesting than I think a lot of us expect. But the bigger question for me is, can Ole Miss get 5 stops?
That's the question for the year. That's the one thing I'm most interested in Monday night and really moving forward is, can the defense?
Wouldn't you agree if they get 5 stops or more, Ole Miss wins in a blowout?
Yeah, for sure. Because they won games last year where they only got 2 or 3 stops.
But
they lost 2 games last year where they scored in the high 40s.
Well, I mean, the LSU game, I mean, what was it, 53? What did they get? Was it 56, 50?
It was a huge number.
50s and lost.
Yeah. I can't remember that.
I mean, for God's sakes, they literally almost won a game. I think they got into the high 30s with 7 interceptions or whatever, 7 turnovers against Arkansas. So
had the ball at the end of the game with the chance to go down the field and win.
Correct.
Yeah.
They had the ball with a chance to take the lead.
Yeah. Jeffrey, as always, man, thanks for the time. Enjoy Saturday. Enjoy your first weekend. Look forward to doing this again.
All right, man.
That was Jeffrey Wright. A little bit of breaking news. That's not really breaking news. It's kind of happening today, sounds like. Houston and Cincinnati both are going to get invitations to the Big 12, which begs a couple of questions. Texas and Oklahoma, can they say, hey, we'll let them in if you'll let us out? Just make a deal right here. I've always thought, and everyone I've talked to believes, that Texas and Oklahoma will be in the SEC next year. I have to believe that Cincinnati and Houston joining the Big 12, if it's imminent at all, meaning if it happens quickly, I have to think that really expedites the exit for Texas and OU out of the Big 12. We'll be talking about that throughout the weeks. Another person we'll be talking to throughout the weeks is Ben Mintz of Barstool Sports. Ben's going to join us every week in this spot, and we'll talk about picks and games and fantasy football and the NFL and all of that. So I hope you enjoy our visit with Ben Mintz. Ben Mintz, Barstool Sports, kind enough to agree to spend a little time with us each week. Ben, good to see you. Hope you've been well. I know we're recording this on the heels of pretty catastrophic news in our home state of Louisiana, but it is what it is, and hopefully the people there can kind of continue to rebound. While it was catastrophic from a property standpoint, does not appear at this point that it's anywhere close to as catastrophic from a human standpoint as Katrina was 15 years ago, thank God.
Yeah, you can always replace property and possessions. You can't replace lives. I'm decked out in New Orleans stuff, wearing a Son of a Saint cap and a Blue Oak NOLA shirt. My buddies of Blue Oak are actually back there trying to feed the community and all the first responders. Yeah, it's just really sad. It's heartbreaking. A lot of not just New Orleans getting hit so hard, but so many surrounding areas that don't necessarily get the national attention. And yeah, you just hate to see it, man. It's a really tough deal, but if we know anything about the people of South Louisiana, they are resilient. They will rebuild. And I've been hearing some more positive stuff. Looks like they're not going to be without power as long as they thought New Orleans. And hopefully, certainly thinking about all the folks in South Louisiana, and that actually impacts a lot of college football this week too.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of, we'll dive into it in a minute. So here's what we're going to do with Ben most weeks, starting next week. We're going to talk to him about the Ole Miss game past and ahead. And then we'll talk a little college football. But on this show, obviously, there's going to be other college football voices. I want to use Ben's expertise at gambling. I know Ben keeps up with the NFL. So we're going to talk Ole Miss each week. So don't worry about that. You're going to get Ben's thoughts on how the Rebels looked the week before, how he thinks they will fare in the game ahead. And then we're going to get some hot NFL plays from him each week, maybe a couple of fantasy plays that he thinks are good plays for you guys. I know a lot of people out there are betting on NFL games. You're in your fantasy football league trying to decide who to play, who to start, all that stuff. So we're going to do some of that too, so that the show's not just, frankly, totally just redundant with one guy after another going through the SEC. That would be easy, and we're going to try not to do that. So this week, however, there is no NFL slate, but there are some NFL storylines. We'll get to those in a minute, get Ben's thoughts on some hot players, some storylines that are happening. But first, I do want to start with Ole Miss. This is if our numbers are any indication, and I bet they are, this is a really highly anticipated season for Ole Miss fans. The Rebels play, as you know, obviously, Louisville on Monday night in Atlanta in the Chick-fil-A kickoff game there at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I guess, Ben, we'll start with just the worst question a journalist can ask, which is just your kind of overarching views of what you expect from Ole Miss this season.
I expect, well, first of all, last year, I say this all the time, sports are supposed to be entertainment. I've never been more entertained by a 5-5 football team ever. I just think Kiffin, just this exciting brand of football, even just how wild these games are. It's just unbelievable how fun they are to watch. And, the program, you look where this program was before they hired Kiffin. kind of nationally irrelevant, just off the radar, off the NCAA. And hiring Kiffin put them back in the spotlight. And what he was able to do in 1 year, Matt Corral was, he barely even played the year before. And now he's 20-1 to win the Heisman Trophy a year later, led college football in total yards. I don't see how you could have had a more exciting year one. Yeah, you lost close games. Maybe a couple more you could have won. And to build in the momentum, the buzz in the program, the recruiting's picking up. You mentioned y'all are doing great numbers with your podcast. People are buying tickets, and, the excitement about Ole Miss football is back. And I think that's just, you can't put a price or anything on that. And I think this team's going to improve a lot. 5-5 last year, I think there's a potential for an 8 or 9 win season. The thing about it, I love all the starters. I think the top line talent looks really good. You just never know what's going to happen on the injury front in the SEC. And I thought last year, especially on the O-line, was a little thinner, people staying healthy. So I think that's kind of the big thing to watch, especially when you look at the gauntlet that hits in October, where it's, at Bama, Arkansas, at Tennessee, and then especially LSU at Auburn, Liberty, A&M. So I think the injuries are going to kind of decide the ceiling. The offense is going to be great. I love the O-line. The running back core is as strong as anybody in the country. You're not going to replace Elijah Moore with one guy, but I think we got 4 or 5 guys that can help. And the defense, what do you say all the time, man? There's such a huge difference between being the worst and slightly below average. And I think that's what we're looking at here. Last year in the 120s, can we get from the 120s to like 70 or 65? And if they do, you pull a top 10 offense and a top 70 defense, you got a recipe to win 8 or 9 games.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's amazing. We've talked about it so many times, but you mentioned Elijah Moore. It's remarkable, the butterfly effect of that penalty. Just all different things.
I'm in Barstool because of it.
Yeah, if Lane Kiffin's not at Ole Miss, that Kentucky game probably isn't, well, it's no probably to it. It doesn't get national attention. It doesn't get, you're not as into it as you are that day. Your celebration.
It's just crazy to even laugh about. Like, one of the funniest parts of that deal was my producer in ESPN Baton Rouge was living with me, and he had been on a trip to New Orleans the night before to see some girl, and he stumbled in that house like right as the game was going to OT. If he's like 30 minutes later, it's just funny, the sequence of events. But no, the Kiffin thing, Dave Portnoy loves Lane. And I don't think if Matt Luke was coaching this football team, I'd be at Barstool. I think that Lane, and Brandon Walker blowing up here, and then the Kiffin thing, it was a perfect storm. And here I am 10 months later somehow still doing the damn thing. I think we're just getting started.
Yeah, and I think Matt Corral's the quarterback at Oregon today, if that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I don't know that Elijah Moore's essentially a first-round pick. He was one of the first.
And he followed me to New York too, taking over New York.
We'll get to the NFL in a minute. I do want to get your thoughts on Louisville. I know you're a guy that studies a lot of teams. We haven't talked a lot about Louisville coming into the season because, frankly, we've been so focused on this team and this season and camp and trying to decipher what Lane Kiffin said and what Lane Kiffin meant and all of those things. I know that Malik Cunningham, the quarterback, is a very talented player. I know they lost a lot off defense. Satterfield's a good coach. What do you make of this Louisville team? What kind of a challenge do they give Ole Miss?
I think they suck. I think their defense is trash. I don't know. They had a good first year under Satterfield that was unexpected, picking up the remnants of the Petrino era, and then they regressed a ton last year. And then you look at a lot of the offseason stuff that happened. Satterfield flirted with the South Carolina job, and it's never good. When they asked Satterfield what's his favorite thing about Louisville, he said that the airport's so close. I mean, that's I'm sure as alumni loved here that he just loved being able to get the hell out of there as fast as he could. So you see that, and then you look at Malik Cunningham. Okay, you got a dual threat quarterback who does throw a good deep ball and he can run. However, he does not take care of the football. Lots of turnovers. And he regressed last year, with people that I looked into some metrics, did some studying. Doesn't seem like Satterfield really trusts him with the way he calls the game. And you're looking at a team that their over-under is 7 wins this year. It went down to 6.5. I actually think Louisville wins like 5 games this year. I think they're bad. I think when you look around the rest of the ACC, there's a lot of like mediocre programs that are going to be better this year. Boston College, NC State, a couple that come to mind. And I think the arrows point downward. And I don't just like Ole Miss because I'm an Ole Miss fan. I think Louisville's bad. And I also think – when you look at this Ole Miss team, a lot of speed and athleticism, playing on that fast track and the Mercedes-Benz Dome in Atlanta, I think benefits us. And I remember a game where we opened against Texas Tech and blew them out a few years ago. This kind of reminds me of that.
So you like Ole Miss minus the 9.5, which is
it went to 10.5. The only thing about Ole Miss that worries me is that it's pretty public. But my point when laying a lot of points, like when you look at point spreads, if the over-under was 43, I don't like laying 10. But the over-under 75.5 freaking points in the game. If you think Ole Miss is going to score in the 40s and maybe 49 or 50 or higher, laying 10 doesn't seem as big a deal if you think that many points are going to be on the board. So I like Ole Miss. I think it's going to be a showcase on Monday night. I think when Ole Miss comes out, like I mentioned that Texas Tech game, Ole Miss won like 49-27, 55-27, something like that. I think we're looking at something extremely similar here. I think the defense is going to cause a couple of turnovers and mistakes, and the offense is going to score a ton, and it's going to be a big party for the Rebels. So I think it's going to be a whole lot of fun on a national stage, and I can't wait.
What do you make of that over-under, Ben? It's a huge number for a week one game. Do you even flirt with the over there, or is the under the safe pick?
Man, I don't like betting unders this Ole Miss team, how fast they go on offense, how much they push the tempo. I do think the defense, I'm buying into the defense improving a little bit, though. I really am. I like the transfers. I like the coaching staff. I just think that, we're dealing with those NCAA sanctions that hurt us so bad last year. And, you look around, Otis Reese, I thought he made a huge difference in the Egg Bowl and the Outback Bowl. I think Sam Williams came on, had the huge game in the Outback Bowl. I'm glad to see him back. Excited to see Chance Campbell. And, I don't know that the defense is going to be good, but I think that they could be slightly below average and feel good about this one. I really think, though, a big part of why I feel so good, I do like Ole Miss's team, but I think we're not playing much here on Monday night. I think Louisville's struggling.
Okay, I'm gonna get to some NFL in a minute. I do want to get you. I know you do a lot of Louisiana radio. You do South Louisiana. You do North Louisiana. So you have to be sort of dialed in on those teams. There are a handful of SEC games involving Louisiana teams. Louisiana Tech's at Mississippi State. It's a 24-point line-ish, 23, somewhere in there. What do you know about Louisiana Tech going into Starkville?
Well, okay, so a couple things on this one. First of all, Mike Leach teams, and this goes way back before Mississippi State, great underdogs and struggle as favorites. Done that his entire career. Texas Tech, Washington State, whatever. You know, you saw that last year when they lost to Arkansas at home week 2. They'll fight you as an underdog. And these are the kind of games that Leach teams don't play as well usually. But Louisiana Tech's not what they were. They hadn't missed a bowl game since 2014, but last year they kind of struggled down the stretch. They got wiped out by Georgia Southern. I actually, you know, I know you have the Ruston ties. I covered Louisiana Tech football for 4 years when I was doing radio in Shreveport. I've got a lot of friends close to that program. The big thing for them, good transfer quarterback in Austin Kendall, backed up Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray at Oklahoma, got beat out at West Virginia by Jarrett Dodge. Tech's had a lot of success with the transfer quarterbacks going back to Jeff Driscoll and Cody Sokol in the past. And so I think he's going to be pretty good. My sources say he looks good. Tech also, they said the roster looked bad in spring, but they got a lot of pretty good transfers. They're over under only 4 this year. I'm slamming the over. Conference USA. I mean, come on. I mean, I think Skip Holtz and that coaching staff's good enough to get them to 6 or 7. I don't think they're going to beat Mississippi State, but I would lean them in the 23.5 or 24. I think that's a lot.
Am I crazy to like Kentucky minus the 29 against ULM the way that I do?
You're not crazy because our old hometown of Monroe, pretty funny though, father-son combo, Rich Rodriguez, OC, and Rhett Rodriguez taking the snaps.
Yeah.
You just can't make this stuff up. I feel like Rich Rod in Monroe is like the Kenny Powers sequel. You know, like once he's just like running around North Louisiana, like what the hell, you know, used to coach Michigan and West Virginia, like where have I gone wrong, you know? But I think ULM, you know, no wins last year, a lot of transfers, all that stuff. I mean, it not going to be fun. The big thing to watch on Kentucky this year, hired a Sean McVay assistant as the new OC. Eddie Gray, thought their play call in the last few years has been, I mean, we'll call it atrocious, just, you know, very boring, just running the middle of the line, relying on defense and being physical. Supposedly the offense is going to be a lot better this year. We'll see. Penn State transfer won the quarterback job. I'm curious on that front, but Kentucky historically plays down as a big favorite. But, man, ULM, I mean, I love my hometown and all, but I think it's going to be pretty rough. I know that they got Terry Bowden and some bigger names, but I mean, it's not a good situation.
No, it was not a good hire. It was simply not a good hire at all.
They're just trying to do anything they can because the difference, like Tech has money. Louisiana Tech has a lot of money because James Davison's one of the richest people in the state of Louisiana, and he funds everything. ULM doesn't have it. They don't have facilities. They're just trying to cling on to anything, hiring a name and Bowden to just get some excitement. So I hope for the best for them. They're over under 1.5 wins this year. I mean, it's not going to be fun.
All right, and then the big one, obviously involving Louisiana teams. LSU heads out to UCLA. Tigers about a 3.5-point favorite at the Rose Bowl against UCLA. UCLA, and I know it was Hawaii. I get it. But in week 1, looked really good, kind of across the board. I don't know. I don't have any idea really what to expect from LSU. There are people out there that are like, man, watch out. They're back. And then I don't know about you, Ben, but I've done this a while. You have too. I've done this a while, and you watch teams, you watch programs, and I don't believe in the roller coaster program that much. And I know they didn't fall off the cliff last year, but it was close, really close to completely off the cliff. Could have easily lost to Ole Miss. Could have easily lost to Arkansas. I mean, that thing could have been 3-7 if you just change a play here and there. And I don't know that I'm ready to go LSU's back, but there's people that know football a lot better than me that are like 9-10 wins. What do you see with LSU as a team? And then what do you expect Saturday?
Well, I've got, you know, working for ESPN Baton Rouge and my ties with them. I feel like I'm pretty juiced into that program with my sources. And last year, perfect storm of everything that could go wrong, literally. You know, you have the best season of all time in 2019. Bad year to have a championship hangover with COVID and all the adversity you got to fight through. Then you have all the opt-outs. You also had some weird stuff with Coach O and the Black Lives Matter. There was some disconnect on that. It divided the locker room. And the biggest thing last year, Coach O, when you have, and you saw this in his Ole Miss days, When he's not a defensive coordinator, specialist, or an offensive guy, he's as good as his coordinators. And when he's got Joe Brady and Dave Aranda, well, then they win the national title. When he goes out and hires Scott Linehan and Bo Pelini, like football's in the year 2000, you saw what happened. That pass defense was 127th in the country, which there's no excuse for the amount of talent they've got in the defensive backs every year. I mean, Pelini was as bad a hire as I've ever seen. You know, he's coaching football like it's 2005. I mean, the spread offense has revolutionized college football, and he just had no clue what he's going on, and he also doesn't relate to the players. So what we know this year, they get rid of Linehan. They go back to Jake Peete, who was Brady's quarterback coach in Carolina. Don't know a ton other than he's a Joe Brady guy, and we all know what happened in 2019. On the offensive side, it's weird. I don't want to sound like this, but like I think it might be for the best that Brennan got hurt so Max Johnson could get all the snaps, because that quarterback controversy lingering into the year with them both taking snaps wouldn't have been good. But I mean, I hate it for Brennan. I don't want to ever say it's good when anybody gets hurt. But I like what I saw to Max Johnson at Florida, and obviously what he did to Ole Miss in the storm and the rain. And last year, could they have won a couple more games? They hadn't started TJ Finley. What the hell were they doing starting him over Max Johnson? Brad Johnson's son, smart guy. I think he's going to be pretty good. They've got all their offensive and defensive line back. Elias Ricks and Derek Stingley is going to be the best cornerback combo in college football. They may be two of the top 3 to 5 already. Look, I don't think LSU's winning 10 games or anything like that, but I do think 8-4, 9-3 for LSU. I think they're going to be a hell of a lot better. The big question on them, Durante Jones was like their 12th choice as defensive coordinator. He was a defensive backs coach for Minnesota for Mike Zimmer. Obviously, we respect Mike Zimmer. He's never been a coordinator in college. That's a lot to deal with. So I just don't know. I don't think he can be near as bad as Bo Pelini. He's got, it's kind of got to go up, but that's the big thing. Can he be competent? I think it's the big thing that's going to decide it, but I do think they're going to be pretty good. I've got them 8-4, 9-3 somewhere in there. I don't think they're going to win the West or anything like that, but I do think they bounce back.
By the time people see this, Ben, the NFL season is going to be less than a week away. It's here. The Bucs trying to defend a title, but I want to start in Louisiana. We've been talking Louisiana for the last 5 or 6 minutes. Let's stay there. The Saints are going to open against Green Bay in Jacksonville now because of the hurricane. But the big story beyond the hurricane is it's not Drew Brees at quarterback. It's Jameis Winston. How does that change the Saints? How does that change their ceiling? How does it change their floor? What do you look for from them?
Man, this is a year. It just seems like a transition year if there ever was one, because they got 10 new starters, the salary cap. They kept most of the core of the team together, but, man, they lost a lot. Then you're dealing with now not being in New Orleans for a month. It's only going to cost them 2 home games, it looks like, though, because they only have 2 home games before Halloween. The Halloween Sunday, Tom Brady and the Bucs, Super Bowl champs coming in, will be the return to Nola. That'll be some kind of emotion and exciting one.
Absolutely.
I have, the big things you look at. Offensive line still one of the best in the NFL. That's a big thing. Defensive line, it's on Marcus Davenport to step up. Still feel pretty good about that unit. I don't think, you're talking about an organization. They're 49-15 the last 4 regular seasons. Yeah, they're going to regress. I still don't think they fall back to like the 7-9 levels of 14-16. I think the Saints, 9-8, 8-9, 10-7, kind of scratching for a wild card's about what I expect. I do, the fact that they were 8-1 when Breeze didn't start the last couple of years. So I don't think that the world ends with him leaving. I feel like my life's a tribute to second chances too. And I think Jameis has learned a lot. We'll see. Can he take care of the football now that he has LASIK? Now that you hear all the right things. He learned from Drew Brees. He looked up to Breeze. He's been in Peyton's offense. It's second chance. He's on a vegan diet. He's married. You hear all this crap. We'll see what actually matters, when they play. But I have some faith that they're going to be pretty good still, but not great. And I also want to mention the Louisiana schools. We got to mention Tulane. How crappy is it for Tulane? They had Oklahoma coming to New Orleans for their biggest home game ever, and they lose it. Talk about a shame. Now they got to go to Norman. Oklahoma's favored Oklahoma's going to beat them by 1 million. That's
yeah, and those kids stuck in Birmingham for the time. That's a miserable.
Horrible. I hope Oklahoma goes back to Tulane, because just losing that for that. You don't get a top 3 team coming into one. That's just a shame.
And I'm sure Oklahoma would love to do it, but it's just the schedules are done so many years in advance. And frankly, Oklahoma doesn't know whether they're going to be in the SEC or the Big 12 next year.
Yeah.
It's so hard to figure out how you're going to do that when you know that at some point in the next few years, probably sooner rather than later, you're going to be changing leagues. I mean, even if you want to, hey, let's make this right. This isn't their fault. We're doing the best we can. It's still hard to pull it off.
Yeah, that part, I wanted to make sure I mentioned that because that's just a shame what's happening on their front. But I still do think the Saints are going to be pretty good. Obviously, y'all that followed me up at I lived in New Orleans from 09 to 14. Y'all that followed me at Barstool, I go as hard as I can to support New Orleans in every way possible up here. And, I'm going to continue to do that, especially with this hurricane relief. And hopefully we got some ideas coming out with Barstool to help that.
All right, you're up there in New York. Zach Wilson looks terrific in camp. Mac Jones just won the Patriots job. I know as we tape this, I don't think the Bears have made an announcement about who they're going to go with at quarterback. The Niners, I think Lance got hurt, and that's going to kind of take some of the heat off that impending decision. A lot of young quarterbacks in the league. How do you sort of see that playing out with the Jets, with New England, and what do you think happens with Chicago ultimately with this? How they go about when to decide to start the Justin Fields era?
I think they should go ahead and start it pretty quickly because, I mean, it's not like Andy Dalton's going to be taking them to the Super Bowl. So I think you go ahead and go with him. I like Mac Jones a lot. I liked him more. I mean, I know he looks flashy and all, but it says a lot that the offense improved when Tua left and they went with Mac Jones to me. And I think Mac Jones is a smart guy. He's he was a fifth-year senior at Bama. I think he's ready. He ain't going to play behind Bama's O-line this year. And honestly, his receiving corps is worse for New England than it was with Waddle and Devontae Smith. But I still think he's going to be a solid NFL quarterback, and I think he's going to have a pretty good rookie year. Zach Wilson, the Jets thing, I mean, in theory, I like Robert Saleh, the former Niners defensive coordinator, real fiery guy. Matt LaFleur's brother, the Green Bay coach, his brother's the offensive coordinator. So we'll see. There's going to be a lot of rollouts. They're trying to run the ball, protect him. I think Elijah Moore's in a spot to have a good rookie year. I temper my expectations on Wilson. I think he's going to have a good career, but, man, that jump up from BYU they played a cream puff war last year. Yeah. I mean, I know they lost at Coastal, but because of the COVID thing, I mean, they beat nobody. Their schedule was as weak as I've seen. And so I think there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve for him. I think Mac Jones is a little more ready. I think the Bears need to roll with Fields. I think Fields' upside is tremendous.
You too.
I'm worried he's in the wrong organization, man. I just don't know that, they're going to develop him right.
A lot of people talking about Buffalo as a Super Bowl, not just contender, but a team that's finally poised to get past the Chiefs and into the big game. Do you buy it?
Pretty damn good last year. I think, McDermott, incredible coach. You look back at his career, former Eagles defensive coordinator when they were good. He was the Carolina DC when they went 15-1. A lot of talent on that defense, led by Trey White at corner. They can rush the passer. Josh Allen, I mean, the improvement from year 2 to year 3 was one of the damnedest things I've ever seen. That wasn't the same guy. I had a thing where I literally just bet Bills unders blind 2 years ago and went 12-4. It was like a joke. Every week I have a gambling segment on ESPN Baton Rouge, and everybody just laughed. Like, we know Mintz is taking the Bills under because I just did it every week. Last year, you would be very, very broke if you did that. I think they're certainly in contention for it. I don't think it was a fluke last year. I think Allen continues to improve. I'm wondering if they're going to run him a little less now. He's making $43 million or whatever a year to protect him, but they're the definitive favorite in the AFC East for a reason. I think they won 11 or 12 games and they win it.
If it's not Tampa again, and it probably won't be, right?
It'll be pretty damn good, man. I don't know.
Just so hard to repeat.
No, it is. The problem with Tampa last year with COVID, Brady coming in, learning a new system, they were designed to peak in the playoffs. You knew that there was going to be struggles in the season. They got everybody back. They've got such a ferocious front seven. You got a full year of Antonio Brown now with that chemistry. And really, the Tristan Wirfs pick, their O-line solidified last year too, and that was something that wasn't really talked about enough. I mean, it is hard to repeat. I'm not going to say sure if they are or not, but, man, they're going to win a hell of a lot of football games. I mean, there will be – if you find a hole in that team, you've done better than I have, man. They look pretty good to me.
If it's not them, is it Packers, Rams? I mean, who sort of stands out in your mind? If I told you, if the football gods came down and said, Ben, it's not Tampa. Tampa's not back in the Super Bowl. Who would you think is representing the NFC?
Man, there's a big the Stafford. I think the Jared Goff to Matthew Stafford upgrade is being everybody knows Stafford's a lot better, but I think it's bigger than anybody.
See, I'm with you here because I'm an
Goff is trash.
I'm an NFC North guy. I don't think people realize just how good Stafford is and just how little he was surrounded with and just how crappy of an organization that the Lions were and how there were times that Matt Stafford played with big time injuries. And in the back of his mind, sometimes he thought, is this really worth it? I know these are my teammates. I know this is my team. This is my town, blah, blah, blah. They're paying me a ton of money, but we've got no chance. And all of a sudden now he's in a place where he goes, I got a chance. And you can't tell me that's not like just pumping adrenaline straight into the vein.
Oh, for sure. And then the other side of it is that Sean McVay is such an incredible coach, and he's been window dressing a rough situation with Jared Goff. And you even look at their play calling, threw for more yards on play action than anybody in the NFL by far because he was covering up Goff. He hadn't had anybody near as talented as Stafford. So I really think the Rams are going to be excellent. The thing with the Rams, though, you got to keep Stafford, Jalen Ramsey, and Aaron Donald healthy because 3 guys make literally all the money. The depth on the team's not as good. People are sleeping on the Niners to me, too. And I know people don't love Garoppolo and Lance is banged up, but, they made the Super Bowl 2 years ago, and literally I've never seen a team get more injured than what happened to them last year. It was just a complete body count. I think they still battle with the Rams at the top of the division. I'm not sure if I trust Garoppolo to get them all the way, but I think people are kind of sleeping on them, and they're going to be excellent. Green Bay, man, I mean, incredible. I'm glad Rodgers and Devontae Adams came back and all that, but, man, it just felt like last year felt like the year for them, and it didn't. Them not making it last year, it's going to be tough to replicate. Rodgers had 48 TDs last year, too.
It may have been why Aaron Rodgers looked so disconsolate walking off that field that day and was so.
Yeah, last year felt like the year for him, man. I still think they're going to be excellent and really good, but it's going to be tough.
All right. I know it's you guys have a lot going on at Barstool. You got a big show coming up on Saturday that I know you're excited about. You can't tell me a lot about it, I know, but what can you tell the people out there about how they can watch it and why they should watch it?
Yeah, well, it's just the first college football show of the year. And that's a big part of how I got hired. They announced my hiring on the college football show last year. We did all the stuff with the eggs. I chunked the eggs at Brandon on it. And so that's kicking off this Saturday. The show's not going to – so the traveling, I was really pushing hard behind the scenes to get us to go to Oxford for LSU Ole Miss, but it's not going to happen because they're going to states where the Barstool Sportsbook app is live. So they're going to Notre Dame, Wisconsin, and Chicago, and they're going to Washington, Michigan, and they're basically kind of going to be in the north. They might go to Georgia, Tennessee. We'll see. But, man, the opening one with Dave and Dan and Walker and Casey is this Saturday. And we're going to, football season kicking off with a bang. Excited about that. And then just looking at my overall situation at Barstool, it's such a unique company. You got to make them where they can't ignore you. And now I'm hosting the Fantasy Football Factory podcast with Stephen Shea. I'm the number 2 on Pick Central every day, noon to 1, the gambling show. I've recently started writing a lot more blogs because the blog's the old school heartbeat of Barstool. And now I'm trying to do one of those a day. And I'm involved with the poker podcast. We got the World Series of Pokers this fall this year. So I got that coming up during the heart of this fall. And I don't know. I'm just trying to do everything I can to make myself irreplaceable up here. And I want to say on this podcast, too, how much I appreciate the support from Ole Miss fans. It's been unbelievable, the support I've gotten. And anytime you're in media, you're never going to be fully liked by everybody. But overall, the overwhelming support, I know there's a few Ole Miss fans that probably can't stand me, but I'm probably not the most preppy Ole Miss fan ever, to say the least, as I wear my tie-dye shirt. But overall, the support's been great. I think a lot of it was how much people hate Walker that are Ole Miss fans, that no matter who got the job, they're going to be well-liked. But it's been, I really am touched by the sport. And I also want to thank the athletic department. I have a great relationship with Paris Buchanan. And, I think, Walker's doesn't say it, but he doesn't have that relationship with Mississippi State. I can get to Lane Kiffin, and I'm friends with Kermit. And he doesn't have any of that with State. And that's a testament to the athletic department, the relationships we've built. And I'm very thankful. I'm trying to make LSU or A&M. I'm not sure which. Those are the games I'm looking at.
Yeah, those would be 2 big-time home games for sure. Well, listen, I know you got stuff to do. Appreciate you making time for us this week and putting us on your schedule for the season. We look forward to visiting with you throughout the year on the MPW Digital Pregame Show.
Heck yeah. MPW Digital Pregame Show every week. Love what y'all are doing, and happy to be a part of it, and I appreciate you having me.
All right, Ben, have a great first weekend of the football season. Talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
Just wish Ben could get some energy. That's all. Just have some energy, kind of wake up, maybe get some coffee in the system. Always appreciate his time. What a great story. What's happened in his life over the course of a year. Just really remarkable. I mean, really remarkable. Guy's become a national sensation a year after just watching a football game in an apartment. Ought to be inspiration for a lot of people out there. So we look forward to visiting with him every week. Speaking of visiting with people, we always talk to the people at Visit Oxford. Appreciate their sponsorship of MPW Digital, rebelgrove.com. Visit Oxford Executive Director Kinney Ferris sat down with Chase Parham earlier this week. Here's that.
Kinney Ferris now joining us on the show, head of Visit Oxford. Good afternoon. We're recording this. I've always been saying this the last few weeks because everything's changing so quickly, but it is earlier in the week. We're recording this on a Wednesday in case something crazy goes down before we put it out on Friday. But thanks for the time today. We're going to talk a little bit about Visit Oxford, and we appreciate you doing that with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So we've been working with you guys for a long time, really a lot of things trying to promote, a lot of things to push over the course of the years, but we wanted to take a week this week and just kind of talk about you, things that you guys push, things you do, kind of for the people who just come into town or even live here and don't necessarily know. How would you describe kind of the mission of Visit Oxford?
Sure, absolutely. So we are an arm of the city of Oxford. We are the marketing arm. So our job is to promote Oxford for the economic benefit of the community. So we want visitors to come in and obviously spend time and dollars here, stay in our hotels and eat in our restaurants, shop in our shops. But in doing that for visitors, we obviously create some popular events and happenings for citizens to enjoy and kind of increase the quality of life for our citizens as well.
So you mentioned that. Well, I guess we'll kind of start. Obviously, everybody knows about Double Decker and those type things, but you had Eaton Street this past weekend. You've got Holly Jolly Holiday for the second year, so it is kind of becoming an annual thing as you move forward. What is the balance of that? Obviously, you've got the big flagship event with Double Decker, but having more mini events, things seasonal for people to enjoy, whether it's out of town or obviously for your local residents.
Sure. So, our first mission really is marketing, and so that kind of during COVID had to pivot a little bit. We couldn't do what we normally do and spend a lot of dollars on getting people to come into town because it just wasn't safe. And people weren't traveling and we were locked down. And so it gave us some time to kind of start spinning our wheels on, well, what can we do? We know our budget's going to be smaller, but we do think that we're still going to have this money, and we do offer a service to the city that we need to fulfill. And so out of that kind of came these smaller events that you said. And so we were able, we had always wanted to build on our beautiful decorations during the holiday season. And that's a slow time for our merchants here and our restaurants because our college students leave. So we had always wanted to do something to kind of help build their business up a little bit, try to get some more people into town. So that's where Holly Jolly Holidays kind of came from. And it was, something fun for us to work on in our office, and it was very popular. So we are going to be bringing that back in December and able to expand on it for this coming year. And we're really thrilled and can't wait to roll out, more information on that. And then Eating the Street, again, that was kind of something that came from COVID. So the city allowed the restaurants to rent parking places on the square, which is, public land, and set up outdoor dining. And so when they did that, like so many other things, it was just happy coincidence. People loved eating outside for the safety aspect of with COVID, but they also just loved the atmosphere, the vibe that it created in the downtown area. And then we were going to kind of lengthen the sidewalks on Jackson Avenue. So it just sort of gave this opportunity to then expand to have some outdoor dining on that side. And everyone wants to know, are we doing it around the whole square? They're working on plans for that. It doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen in all in one budget year for sure for the city. So after they did that, our office, Visit Oxford, is located on Jackson Avenue East as well, the visitor center. So we wanted to kind of do something to open up the street officially and celebrate. And so that's where Eaton Street came from. And you really kind of are eating in what used to be the street, once those areas get set up. And so we love having live music on the downtown streets, and we haven't been able to do that the last couple of years with Double Decker. And so we had some bands that were wanting to come and play that we had promised and quite frankly paid in 2020. And so we were able to kind of pivot and bring them for kind of a kickoff. It was the first Saturday when classes started at the university, and it was hot, but it was fun and successful, and gave the local community a really fun way to kind of open up that street.
Yeah, you mentioned a year where you had to be really creative. You had to pivot to some different things. You've got Tunes Around Town coming back next weekend for the first home football game. Using those things that were successes during a very difficult time, and obviously safety is still a very important thing as we move forward. But what kind of relief has it been to have the new ideas, but also get back to what you guys are so used to with a football season with a complete capacity, and you expect a big crowd in town? I mean, just the relief of the normalcy that we're hoping is coming here in a few days.
Absolutely. So for us, we are funded. We have a dedicated tax for the lodging properties in Oxford. So we have a 2% bed tax is what a lot of people say. And through legislature, that comes directly to our office to fund marketing for the city. And then we get a portion of the 2% food and beverage tax as well as a lot of other city departments, but we get a portion of that. And really, our task is to increase economic benefit in the community. So that's the lodging tax, that's the food and beverage tax, and that's the sales tax. That's our job. So every dollar they're giving us, we take it very seriously to kind of turn over and bring that back to the community. So when we were able to, take a step back, it did give us those ideas and new ways of thinking, but it was a hard time for our restaurants and for our hotels, especially the hotels. So the relief of knowing that we're getting back to some sort of normalcy. It looks like the stadium is going to be at full capacity. We saw that with baseball. It made all the difference. Of course, we know we're kind of moving into it with the Delta variant. We aren't sure what's going to happen, but for all accounts and purposes, right today, we think that we're going to have a huge football season. The hotel's occupancy is looking good, and the relief to know that they're doing better and making their goals is paramount for us. I mean, that's the whole reason we're here. So it is a relief. And then, it allows us to have a little bit of extra budget, and we can grow these small things like Tunes Around Town, and we can keep them and do them a little bit better with a little more resources. So yeah, it's been, I guess, making lemonade out of lemons a little bit. So yeah.
You mentioned the visitor center for people coming into town, for just locals that are looking for some extra things to do. What kind of things could they stop by, find, that sort of thing there inside the brick and mortar location?
Yeah, sure. So we are at 1013 Jackson Avenue East, and for locals or for people who were here in school at the university years ago, it's the old Freeland Law Firm building. There's lots of history here, and we do have a visitor center in front with maps and attraction brochures. So anything that you might want to do or have a question about some of our different museums, we can direct you there, give you the hours of operations, things like that. For locals or people who maybe have a condo or something, you can come by at any time and get our brochures and collateral to keep for your guests. We want them to have a really wonderful experience when they're here. So education always helps. So, anytime you're downtown, pop in the visitor center just to visit us, or get some information to take home and keep there, at your second home or your condo, whichever way it is. But yeah, so anything that you could want to do, Roanoke is our kind of number one attraction, besides university and sporting events that just draw kind of larger crowds. So the internationals that come to visit Roanoke is astounding. You really are surprised. And a lot of locals have maybe been to Roanoke, or they've done Bailey's Woods Trail, or they've had a picnic there when they're closed or something on a Monday, but you might not have toured it. And it really is neat. It's not every day that you get to go in a Nobel Prize winning author's home, and it's in your backyard. So if you just come up for football, they're open those weekends, and I know they'd love to see you there. And it's a really fun experience. It takes about 30 minutes to go through the house. So yeah, I encourage anybody to do that for sure.
Last year during the football weekends, we focused on restaurants at a time when they really needed it. We looked at a lot of the culinary things in Oxford through this partnership. This year, we're going to focus more on, as you said, the different things to do on a football weekend, the different events, the things where obviously everybody knows come and eat and see the bands that are in town or anything like that, and then football. But there's so many different kind of secondary and periphery events around a football weekend. So what is sort of the focus of that from your mind, the things that people can do, and just the different things that aren't necessarily at the front of mind when people come into town for a weekend, including if it's a girls trip or a guys trip, they can call you guys and get a lot of ideas in different ways that maybe they haven't thought of.
Yeah, absolutely. And we get the guys trip quite a lot here. They're just, trying to check off an SEC tailgate. And so we do get calls for that quite a bit. There's things that it kind of depends. If you're coming and you've never been before, my list would be a little different than if you come every football game. But, I definitely would say you've got to go to Roanoke. You've got to experience that. The University Museum is really a gem that people do not realize that we have here. They have art collections that can stand up next to any major city. Donors from the university have gifted them with works that you're just shocked to find in Oxford, Mississippi, or in Mississippi in general. Anytime I take visitors there, they're blown away. That we have a Georgia O'Keeffe and these big named artists here in this little university museum, but they also have traveling exhibits. So I mean, if you were here from time to time, you could see something different every time. So I would definitely say the University Museum. Check the Ford Center schedule. They sometimes don't, you might not notice it, because you're coming, the big event you're coming for is sports. But you might want to check it, because a lot of times on an off game weekend, especially if you own a second home, you should look at that and go out to eat. You can, get into any restaurant if it's not a home football game. And maybe there's some things you wanted to do that the crowds just kind of deterred you from. So I always suggest that people check out the Ford Center schedule. They're one for the fall and the spring. It's up now. So we really have a jewel in that facility here in our town. One thing that's kind of fun for kids that again, happy accident. We didn't think this would happen, but so we've got the 2 phone booths downtown now. So there's one next to City Hall that's been there for as long as I can remember, as when I was a student. And then we have one by the parking garage now. So it's right behind our visitor center. And so the phones work, they're landlines, and you can actually call out. So people, they go and they call from the phone, their cell phone. So they get the phone number, and then they go to the other one and they call each other from the pay phones. And, it sounds silly to me who grew up with landlines, but for really anybody under the age of 20, that's a new concept, So we have found so many grandparents that have grandchildren visiting them like this summer. That's one of the things that they come and do. So it's kind of a fun little punch list. And then if you've never seen Storytime with Miss Jill and you have kids, That's a must do, in my opinion. She does it on Saturday mornings and on Wednesdays. But so if you're not local and you're here on a Saturday, you want to catch that for sure.
So people coming into town or just people with different interests, what are all the best ways to find you guys?
Yeah, so either come in the visitor center if you're already in town, but we're here 6 days a week. We're closed on Sundays, but we're here every other day. And just give us a call and ask us any questions you have, or we can mail you some collateral. And then the best way to keep up with what's going on in the moment is on our social media, which you can find us on all the platforms at Visit Oxford MS. And then our website has a full calendar of events of things happening here at all times. So, and it's visitoxfordms.com.
Well, thanks for the time today, and we'll look forward to the season ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to talk to you.
Thanks to Kinney and Chase there for their time. That pretty much does it for a 3-hour and 20-minute pregame show. Hope you enjoyed it. Again, our thanks to Pete DeWeese, Ryan Brown, Jeffrey Wright, Ben Mintz, Kinney Ferris for all of their time today on the show. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the first weekend of the college football season. We will be back Monday night with Ole Miss and Louisville. We'll have hand-raised guys brought to you by Walk-On Sports Bistreaux on Monday night. We will we'll have content at rebelgrove.com from the game as well. And then we'll get back with you all of next week and set you up for Ole Miss and Austin Peay, the home opener, a week from Saturday. So until Monday, have a great weekend. Take care.